myself, I'd like to welcome you to the March meeting of Finance and Performance. We start, of course, by calling for apologies, and I have so far got apologies from Councillor Fletcher, Stewart and Dalton for absence, and Member Blair for lateness, Member Typeri for potentially early departure. Any other apologies? I'd like to move those in apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy. All those in favour say aye. Against. Before we start...
Sorry, our Filipina is going to be late.
Thank you, Councillor Filipina. Thank you to Councillor Casey. Before we get into the agenda, I want to start by an acknowledgement for our Group Chief Financial Officer, Matthew Walker. Now, ironically, he is not here, but he is at home watching. Hi, Matthew. This is actually Matthew's final Finance and Performance meeting, acting in the role of CFO, and I believe it is only appropriate to acknowledge the contribution he has made during his time with Auckland Council. So Matthew joined us in 2013 in the Financial Strategy and Planning team and has guided the Council through a period of significant growth and development while ensuring prudent financial management. Through Matthew's stewardship, the Council has been the first issuer of green bonds in New Zealand and a record $26 billion of capital expenditure in the 2018-2028 long-term plan. Matthew has provided clear, thoughtful, cheerful advice to this committee through the last 3 terms of Council, and I believe that you will join me in thanking him for his wonderful service. Thank you, Matthew. I'd like to move, seconded by the Deputy Chair, the acknowledgement on the screen. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any people with any declarations of interest? Fantastic. Confirmation of the minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve. The open and confidential meeting of our ordinary meeting on the 3rd of December 2019, the extraordinary meetings of both the 10th of December and the 12th of February. I'd like to move those. Deputy, will you second? Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. We have no petitions. We were asked for 1 public input, but the request is actually going to another committee. Local board input, we had 2. We had member Graham Gunthorpe from the Waitemata Local Board regarding item 10. You'll be aware that item is now not going to be on this agenda, so that's been deferred until our meeting next month. We had a second from member Troy Churton from the Ōrākei Local Board, but that wasn't a board position, so that's going to be discussed further by the board. Extraordinary items. Your Worship, Councillors, as you're all aware, Auckland is facing an unprecedented fast-moving situation regarding COVID-19. This is our first Finance and Performance meeting since the global outbreak. To that end, it's important to ensure we are handling this professionally, competently and appropriately, and to give confidence to Aucklanders at this time of potential uncertainty. So I have asked staff to update us all publicly, and to that end, we need an extraordinary item to do so. So I therefore move the following recommendations on the screen. Do I have a seconder, Deputy? Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. To that end, this item will take place following our Q2 report. We now move into item 8, presentation from the Eden Park Trust Board. So I would ask John Bishop to introduce the item first, and then we will be joined by members of the team. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. Look, the purpose of this report is to give effect to one of the 2019 resolutions of this committee and invite the Eden Park Trust Board to report to this committee on at least a 6-monthly basis to outline its performance. So on that note, I will hand over to representatives of the Eden Park Trust Board, being Doug Mackay as Chairman, Vicky Salmon, one of its trustees, Nick Sortner, the CEO, and Brett Wood-Stanley, its CFO. I'm happy to come back afterwards and answer any questions you may have.
Doug, Nick, Vicky. Brett. Morena. Microphone, please, Doug. Thanks.
Yep. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. Could I just clarify, Vicky Salmon comes to join and support us as a trustee, but also as chair of the Finance Committee. So clearly things financial are on everybody's mind at the moment. So she is joining us to answer any of those type of questions. Right. Since we came and got your support for a funding package for the park, we have been extremely busy implementing some of the initiatives we talked about, which are in train now, running a very busy event schedule up until the end of last week. But now clearly things have changed. But we're not able to talk in too much detail about how things have changed because we haven't actually had our board meeting yet. The team in the business are working on the financial implications of what might change. So you can ask us any questions you like, of course, but we will not be able to respond in a lot of detail about what's changed in the last 4 days, just at this point. We've got our first meeting of the Finance Committee next Tuesday, where we'll review updated situation. But we've got a presentation deck, which I'm going to ask Nick just to refer to 2 pages, because I think it is of most interest to members of the committee and the council. And I'll ask him to do that in a sec. Once he's finished there, it's my suggestion we then move through the issues in the resolutions. We talk about the funding, we talk about the loan agreement status, we talk about governance, and we talk about the partnering proposal, and we can update you on all 4 of those things. And then that would be us. And we'd be happy to sit here and take any questions that you might have. I might just apologise for Brett Wood-Stanley and ask anybody not to panic. Brett has a long-term 20-year dry cough condition, and we're used to it at the Eden Park Trust Board, but he might break out into a coughing fit. I want to assure you that he is under control, and it is not something you might not want him to have. Okay. Nick, could I ask you in a minute just to go to the 2 pages that I think would be of most interest to the councillors? I want to contextualise that because the challenge, frankly, I was given by the previous mayor and in my time at the council, and the challenge I was given by Your Excellency Phil Goff, Excellency, sorry, Your Worship. Yeah. You'll deserve it after the next 3 or 4 months, Mr. Mayor. And by many of you around the table, was to make any progress at Eden Park, you need to embrace and get closer to your community. And I want to assure you we have spent many waking hours thinking about and doing just that. So I'd like Nick particularly just to quickly update the type of initiatives. We've never felt more closer to our Eden Park community than we are today. So this is our neighbourhood and the people who live around us, the businesses that operate close to us and rely on us, the schools and the other infrastructure around community. So Nick, would you like to talk to those, and then we'll get into more of the business meeting.
Maureen, thanks for your time this morning. I don't have a clicker, so I'll just ask you to move forward through keep going please, keep going please, keep going please. So thank you for your time. As Doug mentioned, over the last 2 years, we've really had a focus on ensuring one of our key stakeholders, being our community, has been central to this decision making at the park. We've had over 200 activities involving the community, and we now have a neighbourhood supporters club of over 1,400 residents, 350 businesses, and in excess of 12 schools who are very supportive of what we are moving forward to. A number of the highlights over the last 12 months have seen, sadly, the Auckland Remembrance Ceremony for the Christchurch tragedy. We were also scheduled last weekend to have the 12-month anniversary and commemoration service. We hold a number of community activities, whether it be Eid, the City Mission Christmas Appeal, the LifeWise Big Sleep Out. We now have a refugee garden based at Eden Park that reinvests back into the community through selling fruit and vegetables, but also there are a number of school activities held at the park that provide children the opportunity to utilise the Eden Park facilities. We're committed to our community and we continue to meet with them on in most instances, a monthly basis, but also communicate with them on a weekly basis to ensure that this is a strategic asset for New Zealand, but it's also a community asset for Auckland. Thank you.
Another page.
The second page, if I can flick to, please. There's been a number of obviously highlights, and keep going, please. And one more, please. Number of highlights in terms of our event calendars, delivering some of obviously the biggest fixtures in New Zealand over the last 12 months. We have got an exciting event calendar in 2021. We're delighted to be hosting the ICC Women's World Cup opening fixtures. We also will be hosting the Rugby World Cup 2021 and Te Matatini. We're in discussions with APEC to host elements of that event, along with a number of other key content and key drivers for the venue. From a venue perspective, we do see the venue as a multi-purpose facility, and the event calendar in 2021 will obviously make a significant contribution to Auckland and New Zealand and showcase us on a global stage. Thank you.
That's all we wanted to talk to, Sandra. Thank you. All right, if we could move to the previous resolutions and for us to update you on those. If I could talk to the loan resolution firstly, and just acknowledge John Bishop here, because the team in your finance department have been just such a delight to work with. They've made it really easy for us to navigate what normally are very cumbersome and quite challenging processes at times. But we got tremendous support from your team to establish and transfer the loans over from ASB. It was seamless, so thank you very much for how quickly and easily that happened. So the loans are now in place, the securities are in place, and so on. And our covenant reporting is in place also, and we've sent, I think, two covenant reports through up until this time. So I won't comment any more on the loan, but clearly, as we sit here today, it's been very reassuring to have that support, and will help us navigate the next period of challenge. I'd ask Brett to talk about Resolution B, which is the funding.
Good morning, everybody. Like Doug, I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Lee Redshaw and his team for the manner in which the development funding agreement was put into place, and once again they've been excellent to deal with through our process of claims so far. We have so far submitted and received payment for $670,000 of claims as outlined in the report, and the principal projects that related to are, first of all, the first instalments of cost of replacement of our turf. That project is underway as we speak. The team are beginning the bedding in process at our Karaka turf farm, and ultimately in around about November the fully grown turf will be harvested and transported to Eden Park to be installed. So $426,000 towards the cost of the turf project. We've also spent $243,000 on a very important project to replace emergency lighting in the south and north stands, an important safety feature for the park, for the facility overall. Thank you.
Nick, would you like to talk to the operational partnering resolution?
Thanks, Doug. A number of meetings have been held with Jim Doyle, with Stephen Town and also Chris Brooks. We have put together 10 examples of efficiencies and also deliverables through that operational efficiencies. However, given the CCO review is in train, we've been advised for that process to pause until the outcomes of that review.
And lastly, governance. I've been engaged with the government on their thinking around future governance. I've talked to Stephen Town about the council thinking on governance, and again, with potential outcomes from the CCO review, we've all decided it just might be better to pause and await any changes in the CCO review, which then might lead us to changes in the governance for the park. So there's been a bit of thinking done. At the moment, and given where we are today, I think stability and people who know the operation of the park on the trust board is really important. So I'm quite happy that we travel on in the current state. So that is the summary of our feedback to the committee, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have a question from the Mayor.
Well, firstly, thank you, Madam Chair. And firstly, can I just acknowledge the efforts that you're making to get better utilisation of the park, particularly as a community facility, and it's great to see it used. For example, Nick, we catch up every year at Christmas with the Auckland City Mission. My question is notwithstanding the fact that your board hasn't met yet to consider the financial implications of COVID-19, but it's going to affect all of us, and I just wondered, probably, you know, even if you took it back a year, you can't hold events of more than 500. I suspect that by early this afternoon it'll be no more than 100, and effectively you'll close down, other than maybe matches that can be broadcast with no stadium audience. What is the potential financial income loss of revenue on a monthly basis? Just going back over the last couple of years and averaging it, what would you expect to be losing for as long as you're required not to use your facility for that purpose?
Understand. Our financial year runs to the end of October, so we have run a set of forecasts at the revenue line only. And we have $7 million of revenue at risk if you assume this situation goes through till the end of October. We were travelling between now and October. Yes, yes. We've got a starting small positive cash position, and we have some unutilised facilities in the loan from the council. So we're just sitting there pondering all that at the moment. We will have a very intense meeting on Tuesday to get to the bottom of it. But effectively, it's an unprecedented situation for us and many other businesses, which I see in my other worlds, of course. Never seen a situation where there's zero revenue. It's not about managing your costs, it's just zero revenue. As a trust board, we've stopped paying fees, and you know, we've decided that our fees could support 2 full-time employees. So we're trying to, but it's all at the edges really when you've got a $7 million hit to revenue.
Oh, wow. Okay, Councillor Darby.
Thanks, and thanks Doug, Nick and others. Just on the outset, Mr Bishop introduced this in response to the resolution, but we are 1 year after the resolution, which indicated at least 6-monthly report. So I've not seen any email correspondence go to all the members about why we are only getting this now. So can I have an explanation, and this is not for Eden Park to explain, it's for our organisation to explain why we are 6 months out on the resolution, our resolution.
Can we just come back to that when Mr Bishop comes back into the room? There was an election in the middle of all this, I must admit, but we'll wait. We'll just wait. Hold that question. Do you have another one, councillor?
Just at the outset, that resolution required an invitation be put to Eden Park to attend on an at least 6 monthly basis to outline their financial and I think revenue projections. I can't remember the exact wording now. So are we going to satisfy that resolution? Because I'm not...
I'll come back to you.
We haven't dealt
Yep.
with the annual report, so the
Correct.
financials is the annual report. We haven't heard any real detail there. And then the financial projections are not easy to address.
Hold that. When Mr Bishop comes back, we'll answer your questions. All right? So just hold your questions and I'll get you an answer when he comes back.
Well, the second part of the question is really to Eden Park Trust. Are we looking at the annual report, the financials in detail? Because we haven't had anything presented to us to satisfy the resolution.
Okay, do you want to answer that?
Chair, could we go, there is a slide in there of financials, which is our financial update till the end of January, I think it was. We could go there.
This one. Councillor, we're just pulling back the presentation.
Thank you.
The annual report was distributed widely, so I only hope that it landed on every councillor's desk that wanted it. Okay.
Chair, the resolution is to outline, today is about the opportunity of Eden Park Trust to outline its performance and financial projections. Performance, that's annual report, and looking ahead.
So I think what I'm hearing from the team is that they have sent out their annual report to all councillors. I have to be reminded exactly when that was, but it has been received.
December.
In December. And now they're talking about their financial projections as per the resolution looking forward. There is a financial slide in your pack.
Sorry, that's not accurate. You've got to go to the resolution. And the resolution is they're here to address the
Nick, do you want to talk to the whole presentation?
projections.
Yeah. We've found it.
And Chair, it's not reasonable. Look, I'm sorry to be a little bit ropey about this. If we're just relying on the annual report, why would we invite them here? You can't just land a report and rely on that as being an explanation of the performance.
Yep, or just let the Eden Park respond.
Okay. Just with respect to the timing, the funding loan began as of the 30th of September last year, so we are less than 6 months from the instigation of the funding loan. The financial performance is summarised on the screen there. Our FY 2019 actuals are our financial results for the 12 months to 31 October 2019. We achieved a profit, an operating profit before interest of 3.794 million, interest costs of 1.3 and a profit before depreciation of 2.492 million. After the book entry for depreciation, we posted a total comprehensive loss for the year of 6.341 million. Our performance in the financial year was more than $1 million better than our budget for the year. That's at the profit before depreciation line. And looking forward to 2020, once again, we have variations in our event calendar. We have a better top-line revenue of $18 million expected in the budget projections. Obviously, we're in a different world today. We were anticipating an operating profit of 3.7 million, which would yield a profit before depreciation after interest costs of 2.5 million. In terms of our cash flows, in rough numbers, our profit before depreciation equates fairly closely to our excess cash, subject to our capital expenditure costs. And therefore, our total comprehensive loss budgeted for 2020 was 6.3 million.
So what you're saying is it took 6 months to do the work, so therefore you have met the guidelines as per the resolution. Is that correct?
Well, I believe that the intention was to present within 6 months of the loan being established, and the establishment date was the 30th of September. So that's the discussions we had internally with council representatives.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
So I certainly take on board all of the things that you're doing in terms of the community, your engagement, and the like, and I'm mindful that Eden Park, I would suggest, is well placed to respond to an event such as we have. What would interest me, and I don't need an answer right now, is how the council is able to assist Eden Park, given that I would suggest it's a critical part of the event and stadium delivery across New Zealand. And as much and all as we can't second guess how things are going to develop, there will be a rebound if we can keep out and stamp out. New Zealand is very well placed. So I just invite a response as to how soon you may be able to come back to us.
Thank you for that question, Councillor. And I would have to say that the Council has already done a lot. And if we didn't have your support last year, I would hate to think where we might be now. As to what we might come and talk to you about in the future, I really don't know. I hope that we can manage within our own resources and with the existing facilities that we've already established with you. And if we all believe, which I do, that this thing will last for 6 months, 9 months maybe, the world will come back. It's not like the GFC. There was a broken part of the global financial system in the GFC, and that needed triaging. We don't have anything broken in the financial system across the world at this point in time. It's a health emergency that is having implications everywhere, and a health emergency should be able to be resolved. So we really need events to come back to the park. We need our supporters to stay with us in terms of the sponsorship partners, the people who buy memberships, and our corporate boxes and so on. And at this point in time, I can't tell you what the outcome of that will be. Be much better placed mid next week to understand what those implications are. But thank you for the question, and thank you for what you're doing already.
Could I just add one further comment that Eden Park has contacted both government and council and made the facility available for any alternate purpose should there be a need, and should the issues that the world and New Zealand is facing, we are available as a major piece of infrastructure for Auckland.
One other related question, and that is, I certainly received your annual report, and I've since spoken to yourself and other people on Eden Park. So I just seek that there isn't any issue, obviously, communicating with you and working alongside you.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Well, Chair, firstly, a quick question for you to confirm, and then I do have a question for the Trust Board. I assume that we're not reasonably expecting the Eden Park Trust Board, I mean, they can report on their financial position from the period previously, but it wouldn't be reasonable to expect the Eden Park Trust Board to be able to accurately forecast their financial position moving forward, given that we are at the start of the global pandemic which is requiring a reforecasting of budgets for everyone. We can't even do that ourselves as council yet. We can't expect the CCOs to do that yet, and it wouldn't be reasonable to expect that the Eden Park Trust Board today would be able to forecast its financial position with any degree of accuracy into the future, other than to say that it will be a watching brief. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, given that if we weren't at the start of a global pandemic, maybe we could talk about the future, but what I'd like to talk about today is where the improvement in the operating income came from, because obviously your position is better than it was previously. So notwithstanding the fact that you had less events, where did that additional funding revenue come from? What have you been doing to drive that up?
Thank you, Daniel. And I referenced the Mayor's comments earlier that we are looking to innovate and diversify our revenue streams by utilisation. Our function business has seen significant growth and utilisation of our assets, along with our tourism initiatives, where we see up until 10 days ago up to 2 tours a day and up to some weeks 1,000 tourists a week visiting the park. This year we are projecting for 2 All Blacks fixtures, and the performance to date of the Blues, along with 5 cricket fixtures, one that obviously has been postponed, saw that growth in our revenues.
What's your capacity for to be a point of, if in the event of an emergency response? What's your the facility itself is a large facility. What's the ability to access all parts of it? Understanding there's obviously a need to ensure that that people can be operating at safe distance. But it is an important location. So have you done much planning around that, obviously, beyond offering the facility?
We've identified this as a time for the community to band together. We're working with our hirers and broadcasters on developing content that complies with the government regulations, but also sees utilisation of the park. In the event that issues do escalate, we are already a disaster recovery centre for Auckland and New Zealand. We do have the capability with our control rooms and various facilities throughout to be able to accommodate emergency services and various other requirements should they present.
Okay, and my one final question, let's assume that and hopefully in the not too distant future, the immediate situation is resolved and we're now gearing back up into recovery. What's the readiness of the park to start to take those events and also to the other smaller community events and opportunities to and drive patronage so that we can, as we enter the recovery phase?
Certainly the message to our staff and our partners is we will find a way, we will get through this together, and we are confident that people will want to go and experience sport and entertainment when we get through this situation. So we are planning a number of our functions have been postponed rather than cancelled. A good example is the police with their graduation ceremonies. Yes, they've been postponed, but they've committed, once we can, they will continue to be held at Eden Park.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Trust Board, for your proactive offer of Eden Park. That's certainly much appreciated. I guess congratulations on your financials too, that really were highlighted there by Councillor Newman, and yes, you know, I did read that in January when you sent that report out, so thanks for that. My question, however, kind of goes to tying all these things together, and that's you know, what Doug referred to, the unprecedented situation we find ourselves and the world find itself, and that notion of how for our nations, mental health, physical health, that a degree of normality does continue. Now you obviously have contacts with big stadiums around the world. And I wonder if you could just give us a little indication as to how, the sort of creativity that's been exhibited in the local events, the regional events, the national and international events might be applied to a pandemic situation where all the measures of social distancing perhaps could be dealt with, but we could still host events or cater for community functions that would go to that continuation of a degree of normality, keep the park functioning, and of course ensure that there's no spread of the virus.
Thank you. In relation to the utilisation of the park, we have made ourselves available to our key hirers. We do acknowledge that it is important that sport can continue, but we are very mindful of the government regulations and restrictions, and we would certainly be in a position to ensure that we comply with those. There has been some discussions around whether or not a limited number of people could continue to visit the park, but as we all know, that could change within a 24-hour period.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My question is really, I guess, to you, Doug, and that is, you intimated there's a possibility of a $7 million loss because of COVID-19 between now and October. Is that the net figure or is that the gross? Because your income exponentially increased social expenditures. I presume that what you quoted was the gross figure?
That was the gross revenue figure.
So what would the net loss potentially be with your expenditure dropping?
Well, that's what we need to work through by Tuesday and understand what costs we can contain, what work we can stop doing and just pause for the moment. But on the other hand, if there's no activity at the park, we've got an unusual window where we could get some stuff done that is hard to schedule when you've got constant activity going on. So we've just got to balance all that up.
We'd be interested in knowing what that number is at some point in time. My second question, if I may, Madam Chair, is purely about the horny old toad in your financial wardrobe, which is the depreciation, and your annual accounts showed the numbers pretty much static. If you get this omnibus consent, are you going to be able to make some inroads into the backstory of the depreciation funding?
I don't see depreciation changing because it's all calculated in conformance with accounting standards. But clearly, if we can find new sources of revenue as we come out of this situation, any increased indebtedness or any financial pressures we have incurred getting through it, we will be better placed to service and pay down. But the depreciation number I don't see changing as part of that. Frankly, I don't pay much attention to depreciation. I can be criticised for that if you like, but the number that really matters is the profit before depreciation, what I call, operating profit after interest. If we can satisfy our cash flow requirements week by week, and we can turn a $2.5 million surplus on cash, then we've got some money to invest in improving the park and paying down our debt.
Yeah, so creating that headroom by paying down debt creates that, it's the same thing as funding depreciation to a degree, its ability to borrow out, just extenuates the circumstance. That's good to hear, thank you. Once we get through the hiccup we're facing at the moment.
I think when we started in September, the debt was 46 million, Brett, was that right? And
46.6.
And we got it down to 43.3 already. So we were making headway. We were determined. We wanted to, deal with the debt that the council had made available to us, and we were progressing.
Well done. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Two questions. One is, Mr Mackay, you said earlier that you had a facility to draw down on. Did you mean the council grant or a bank facility?
Now, the council grant, as far as I'm concerned, is hypothecated to the projects that we told you about.
That's fine. So what? No. What? Sorry. So you were talking about another facility, not about.
Talking about the debt facility.
Thank you. So my other question is, it's around Resolution C with operational partnering proposal, and you said that you'd agreed with, I guess it's RFA you're talking to, that you would put this off because of the CCO review, but I'm a bit sort of stumped around that because there's been a 9-month hiatus since we made the resolutions where that could have been progressed. It didn't need an agreement. It could just have been got on, and you could have made considerable savings. And so, and then you said, oh, well, actually, we're best placed to look after our own grounds. So I just wondered how committed you are to that process, because there was no reason to stop it for a whole 9 months. So, yeah, I'm really a bit confused, because I know that you're committed to savings and this hasn't been progressed.
We made efforts to get started, but you can't make a lot of progress in the first 9 months on a partnering proposal like this, because there are long-term contracts in place and you are obliged to deal with an opportunity to do things differently as and when those contracts fall due. So the only serious and significant contract around partnering that has come up in that 9 months, we did participate in with RFA.
So you're still committed to that process?
Oh yes, I said we are. Yes, we are. But with the CCO review underway, I chatted with Stephen Town about it, and we don't know where that's going to land in respect of RFA and other CCOs, I presume. And we might be dealing, with different people in a different construct very shortly. So he thought it would be best to pause for the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou. Nice to see you again, Mr Mackay. In terms of my questions, I do just want to acknowledge that the crisis and the unprecedented times, and that everything is up in the air at the moment. So in that context though, but I just have 2 questions. One is, you've had representatives participating in the annual budget consultation, and I just wondered, what was Eden Park looking to get out of that process and hoping to get out of the annual budget? And the other question was around, you mentioned that, if we go into a very quiet period, we're going into a very quiet period, this might be the opportunity to do some capital works. Would they specifically be the capital works that are funded from the council grant? With other additional funds?
Your second question, yes, we could advance some of those projects. We haven't made decisions to do that yet, and it might be that when we talk to John and others, as you cope with the pressures on you, you might ask us not to progress some of the projects that are currently scheduled over the next 2.5 years. But if all I'm saying is we will have a gap in the schedule where we could get some stuff done quite quickly and very efficiently versus normal operations. So let's have a chat about that and weigh that up. As to your first question, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood your annual budget.
We're currently in a have your say consultation process around the annual budget, and I know Nick went along to a have your say session,
Yes.
which is to give feedback on the annual budget, and I just wondered if you'd like to share what it is that you were wanting to see in the annual budget as Eden Park, because that's obviously, that process that we're in.
Thanks for the question. I attended the Albert Eden local board meeting just as obviously an interested observer. We as a board have not made any submission, or as a trust submission to the council, and there's been no decision if we were to do so. Our focus is on obviously our existing operations and ensuring our staff can continue to operate in the park.
So that was a regional have your say event in terms of what participants would like to see in council prioritise. So are you just saying that Eden Park is not looking to formally submit on that process, or doesn't have anything you want to bring to our attention that we should know about?
No, sorry, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we haven't had a chance to meet to discuss that process. I attended as obviously an observer with a couple of other community representatives. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to a time when around this table we're talking about economic recovery rather than downturns. And I noted the unique window we have where activity can happen without busy things around us. And I also note many saying that this COVID situation is really a dress rehearsal for future climate change impacts and climate change emergencies that we have. So to that end, I'd like to ask you what steps have been taken at the stadium for more sustainable operations, and are you planning to talk more about this through this period? From an environmental climate change perspective.
Thank you for the question. Perhaps we could flick back to the slide that was featured in today's deck. It's on, backwards, yeah. Keep going. Thank you. No, that one there. So I'm very proud of the work that our staff are doing in this space. We have a membership manager that's been 30 years in the business that now is an agile organisation. Leanne is now our membership manager and sustainability manager. And if you were to attend the venue on a Sunday or Saturday morning, you'd see Leanne going through waste, sorting waste, with a commitment to ensure that we minimise any of our waste going to landfill. So there's been a number of initiatives at the park in terms of sustainability. We're moving towards eliminating single-use plastic at the facility. We've moved towards aluminium cans, as the advice received is that is a better approach in our retail outlets. We have compostable packaging throughout the venue, and that is just scratching the surface in terms of what we're doing. We work with the community. People can bring their waste down to Eden Park. There's a community composting area where that is then the compost occurs, and then it's collected by residents in the community, or then utilised by our refugee garden. Our tourism initiatives, including our rooftop tour and zip line. We had commentary recently that it might be the first carbon neutral, and I think for a team that is quite lean, it's been huge steps made in the supply chain at the park.
Mr. Bishop, are you here? Oh, sorry, yeah, we're just going to get him, he's back. Yep. They're not going. We're just getting it. Well, we're just getting John to answer Darby's question, then we'll, okay. Thanks, John.
Great, through you, Chair. So look, just to confirm, the loan was signed at the end of September, and I think the grant was only signed in December. And given the timing of Eden Park's annual accounts, this seemed the first practical occasion to have Eden Park along to talk about their results.
See, thank you. So you're confident that this works within our resolution?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Just a point on that, because that's a response to
Yes.
my question. I invite members to look at the resolution and just ask themselves really whether that satisfies the resolution. Because even if that was the case...
And it is.
Well, that might be the case about the loan and the grant, but the resolution doesn't say that. The resolution says there's an expectation of invitation, and I'm sure Eden Park would have accepted that invitation to come in here and discuss performance and financial projections. Doesn't talk about the loan, doesn't talk about the grant. It's a resolution that stands alone, and I have to say there's been no, I've asked this question and I've copied you to the emails, Chair, there's been no email to all of the members of this committee explaining why that resolution was not satisfied. And that's not okay.
Right, point taken. Thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Eden Park Trust Board and Nick for being here today. I just wanted to make a comment, actually. I appreciated the opportunity to come out to Eden Park some months ago and see what you guys are up to. Didn't really get into the sport that was playing. It was either league or rugby, one of those two things. But what I did see was the efforts that you're putting in, Nick, to make some money, which I acknowledge. I also acknowledge you guys being a living wage employer, and that's one of the first things you did when you started there. And also that your activities aren't just about the Eden Park community. You go wider than that to the rest of the community, the rest of Auckland. And I just want to acknowledge that here in front of the councillors and your trust board. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I just make a comment on that? We do employ up to 3,000 people on an event day. And so, as you can imagine, the security guards that generally get a 30-hour week in our function business, that is every revenue stream of ours has been affected. But the downstream effect is that there is going to be a lot of people who have had working opportunities at Eden Park affected by this. And I appreciate that acknowledgement, and we are doing everything we can to support those employees through this challenging time.
Thank you. Member Taipuri.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Kanui te mihi kia koutou tēnei wā. So I just wanted to say, because I remember the days quite vividly about whether we would support Eden Park further and stabilise and grow for the future, and took some pretty strong pressure that day, I don't mind saying. So it's good to see the report that you're providing about the progress you've made. And it's unfortunate, like it is across the board, across the world, about where we all are at the moment. So, you know, again, I've just had a few months, most of it's been in isolation, been in China, been here, and what I watched is the need to collaborate in order to give us all our state of mind back about some normality and who we are. So to me, events, stadiums, the things that we you know, as New Zealanders, we cherish on a weekly basis in our lives, and we'll see that shortly as everything stops, and we haven't got it anymore for some time. But I think what's most important for all of us is the need to continue to collaborate and support each other, and how we can get back to where we were and stronger. So I'll continue to do that, and I appreciate the report today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
I just want to pick out the matter you've raised about making some improvements at Eden Park, and I take on board your comment about spending money. But quite obviously, if we're interested in a fast recovery and a real good bounce back, and the sorts of comments that Mr. Taipuri is making around collaboration, I would hope that in terms of your engagement with us, that you consider that, and also quite obviously issues that go to employment and so on, because I'm mindful that the larger context on the part of government is its spending, so that people are kept in employment and we have bounce back. So I'd invite a comment around that. And the other question I've got is just to Mr. Bishop, and it goes to this matter of the report back, because the words say invite. Did we actually send an invitation to Eden Park? And if so, when? And that's on the report back on a 6-monthly basis, because there are two parties to that, and obviously one party is council and our expectation.
It doesn't need to be said, but I'll just restate it. We will come and talk to you at any time you want to hear from us, or you want an update on what's happening at the park. So that is a given. We are, as Mr. Taipuri said, in partnership and collaboration with the council. You are our most important partner, and we will turn up any time you want us to be here, beyond just the reporting deadlines or timeframes in the resolution, if necessary. Whether we do advance some of the works that sit there at the park and parts of the facility that need sort of repair or remediation is something I would only do in collaboration with, in full visibility of the council. We would need to tap, I suspect we would need to tap into some of the debt facility that sits there unutilised at the moment to do that. I would not, without your authority, take the operating grant of 9.8 million over 3 years and use that for things that we had not come here and asked for that support for. So I'd have to come back and present that. So it's work in progress, and can we capture this opportunity and take advantage of it to that effect? I don't know yet, but thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just say to Councillor Bartley, thank you for your comments, and what a privilege it was to host you at the park. We find that there are a lot of preconceptions about the park out there, And when people come and are willing to give us the time to show the park and its operations, meet its people, we find those perceptions get adjusted and reflect more of the reality that we are as an organisation and what we're trying to do in the future. So thank you for giving us your time and allowing us the privilege of showing you around the park.
Thank you. Councillors, I'm just conscious that we have a time frame for the extraordinary item because staff are actually having meetings in the other building. So just get the question to a brief if we can, please. Councillor Mulholland.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I acknowledge your comment and following up from others. I'd like to ask a question as well. I'd like to thank the Trust Board for your attendance. I acknowledge the current climate that we are all faced with in this community in Tamaki Makaurau and Aotearoa. I too visited Eden Park, and I want to acknowledge Nick and the staff that took the opportunity to share with me as a new councillor your role and the actions that you are taking to work alongside community. And I was most impressed by the work and the presentation that you provided to me. It helped me to understand the position that you're in your relationship with the governing body and therefore Tamaki Makaurau people. So thank you for that. I also received a copy of your annual report. My question to you is, it's about how you communicate moving forward with the community, your many followers and people who are huge fans of sport, and I also acknowledge the IMSB and their commentary on this matter. Will you be able to communicate with us, or myself, as to the actions you're taking and what you're sharing with community to help them understand what you will be doing moving forward in the next few months in relation, because there's a lot of talk about sport on TV if people do watch that. And by the way, I'm not a rugby player, neither am I playing cricket, but you know, how will you be communicating that? Because you will be in a position to alleviate some fear that we're seeing. So I'm just wondering, would you like to send that to us in email, or how will you be providing and keeping the fear at bay?
Thank you, and I appreciate you visiting the park. It's probably something I neglected earlier is to mention our partnership with Wellington Phoenix and also Rugby League, that Eden Park is a stadium for all of Auckland and New Zealand, not just cricket and rugby. And the work that we've done with Wellington Phoenix, they remain undefeated, and how great it would have been to have a final of Wellington Phoenix in Auckland if they hadn't made that. But there are a number of other hirers now utilising the park. We have done an extensive amount of work with football around the FIFA Women's World Cup for 2023, and let's hope in June New Zealand and Australia become the hosts for that very, very exciting event for women's sport. In relation to the community, yesterday we launched a number of initiatives on our Facebook and Instagram site that inevitably people are going to be spending more time at home. We have Eden Park Lego sets, we have Eden Park backyard cricket sets. We made 100 available to the community and they were snapped up. We're working with people like Dave Latelli and Butterbean around doing online exercise programs for people. We're looking at doing music events from the park streamed live. We know that people are going to be spending time with their families, but they'll also be looking to get their sports fix. So what are those items that we can do with our hirers, with our broadcast partners, to actually have a level of normality during this challenging time?
Right, thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair, and it's appropriate that I ask that question based on what Nick just said around exercise. So look, kia ora mai tātou, ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. Look, the loan's been mentioned, as in the grant. I'm not going to traverse that because it is what it is, it's happened. But however, on that particular day last year, I asked a question, Nick, of you in regards to working together with RFA from an operational perspective, and especially for all our stadia, so we're all connected. And there was an undertaking from yourself in regards to, let's join up, or let's see what we can do, so then we're not competing with each other. So in light of that, Can you give us an update as to where that piece of work is?
Thank you for the question. Eden Park has submitted 10 areas that we believe there's opportunities for efficiencies, and that was submitted last year through the chair of the Combined Operational Efficiencies Program, Jim Doyle, and just reiterate Doug's comments that the advice received was for that work to be paused until such time as the CCO review was completed. So we're certainly open for that discussion, and as I say, I've got a document outlining those operational efficiencies that is possible between the parties.
Just through you, I just reserve my right to speak on the item.
Okay, Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. And just at the outset, I just want to make clear to the Trust Board, my criticism of the so-called no-show 6 months ago is not of you, it's of our organisation. Because the invitation needed to be conveyed and the resolution needed to be followed up by us. It wasn't for you. To be clear. Just going at the financials, so I do need to look at that. And so the income is down 1.2, and I'll just run through some things and maybe you can respond. The overall income on the 19 annual report is down 1.2 million on the previous. Sport event income is down 660k. Membership income is down a whopping 1.3. Wouldn't mind an update as of, say, January, February on that, of this year, I mean. Functions income is up 300,000, that was good. And maybe you could just tell us where you found that. Was that the Mandala exhibition? What were the numbers like there? Gaming of 500,000 you receive, gaming revenues or gaming income. Can you just tell us what that is used for? And although you say, Doug, you don't pay much attention to depreciation, I did notice the depreciation. 17, it was down, went up 18, down in 19 by $1 million, and then projected to stay the same in 20. So there's a real inconsistency in the addressing of depreciation, which I noticed. If we could have a look at that. And I understand the projections going forward are near impossible, given the state of the globe. That was the first question on that. And I'll just run through my second and third areas. How much funding did Eden Park receive from ATEED for the now abandoned double header this week? I think it's this weekend, now abandoned. And is
Zero.
Zero. There was no ATEED arrangement. Have you been negotiating with ATEED any other funding?
We talk to ATEED about all of our events. They come and talk to us about events they'd like to bring to Auckland where Eden Park might be the right venue. So it's a case-by-case arrangement. There's no agreed overall budget allocation between us or anything. It's case-by-case, and can we both make sense of it financially?
Okay, so there was no agreement for the double header between ATEED. They must have been talking about something else. And just the last one, on the concert application, is the Te Matatini concert subject to the receiving of that consent? And the last part to that question is, what expenditure to date and projected do you anticipate to go through the application and hearings process, expert evidence, etc., for the resource consent? I hope you've got all of that, but it was a rush through.
The resource consent for the concerts, we're about 2/3 of the way through the cost of that now. You spend all the upfront money getting the reports done by the various traffic and noise and everything else. And from memory, that's about $600,000 we've spent. It's not out of any of the council money. It's funding that we create through our own profit and loss. And we have probably on balance, depending on whether we go through independent commissioners, whether we go straight referral to the Environment Court, there might be another $300,000-400,000 there. So that's still sitting there. We do intend to continue on with this process. As you know, we have a discretionary right to have up to 6 concerts. And we've come to the conclusion after 3 applications for a single concert that's a Clayton's.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I think it's inappropriate to be discussing this at this time while it's going through due process.
Yeah, I'll accept that. Actually, just leave that, Doug, please. Thank you.
Fine. All right.
We're not discussing the resource consent application, we're just discussing the management of the resource consent application, I thought.
Yeah. So, well, we are continuing on with that, and we see it even more important now, given the situation we find ourselves in for a fast recovery.
Is that subject to the resource?
No, it's not. No, it can operate within the existing rules and regulations around the park. We're very excited about Te Matatini. It's the world's biggest Polynesian festival, Maori festival, and they are very excited to bring their kids and to the iconic Eden Park. They can say they've been on the turf at Eden Park, so we're very excited about that.
Councillor Watson.
I haven't had I asked a series of financial questions.
That's what we're here for. For Brett to respond to those.
So regarding the 2019 financials, a range of particular conditions existed last year. It was a Rugby World Cup year, so we held just 1 test match. Test matches are one of the major contributors to our annual revenues. So the consequence of that was a loss of venue hire fees, but it also has a flow-on effect throughout our a number of other revenue streams. So, for example, memberships. We charge less for membership in a year when there's less content. There were only 2 cricket games last year. In the previous year, there were 3. So that has an impact. The margins that we will earn within those events vary. So there are a range of conditions that take effect in that financial year. So we were down largely because of content. So we knew we were down, and we budgeted accordingly. And as I mentioned, I think we achieved an operating profit in excess of $1 million greater than the budgeted result. So at the beginning of the year, we've got a fairly good idea of what the event calendar looks like. We've got very good prior information around what the returns will be. We can plan fairly accurately around what our suite incomes are, around our sponsorship income. So we're actually a fairly easy business to plan and forecast for when things are running as per the program. So yes, we actually overachieved last year given the particular circumstances that we were under. You mentioned the variation in depreciation. The only reason for that was we booked an impairment allowance for against certain fixed assets. I know it's been a subject of discussion today, but depreciation is driven by estimates of the useful, reasonable life of an asset. So the asset is amortised over time. It's been paid for, so it doesn't cost you any money to depreciate, but you have to book the entry. So where we have an obligation under accounting rules to evaluate the reasonable life of assets, their useful lives, and so we made a one-off adjustment which had about $1 million effect. But the underlying depreciation, as Doug has described, is very similar. It will only vary on the basis of extra capital expenditure, which results in future depreciation, or assets that have been fully amortised, which you no longer depreciate. So it's a very mechanical exercise.
Right, thank you. I'll move the resolution on the screen to thank the representatives from Eden Park, noting that you will always be willing to come and talk to us at any time. Thank you very much. And I've just added a little extra, of course, based on the fact that there is some uncertainty around future projections. So thank you for that. I've got a seconder, Councillor Walker. All those in favour say aye. Oh, sorry, no. Comment, John, you were first.
Yes, I was just going to very quickly comment and basically just to say to thank the Trust Board for today and to say that, the financials have been reassuring as they need to be, because we have been consistently told by our staff and our CCOs how important Eden Park is to Auckland. We were told this time last year how the ongoing park operations is in Auckland Council's commercial and regional interests. So our officers told that. Regional Facilities Auckland told us that we see the financial and operational sustainability of Eden Park as an essential element, and ATEED said much the same thing in respect of how important it is to have a venue such as Eden Park to hold world-class large capacity stadium events. Of course, we know they hold a lot more than large-scale stadium events. We have all this veritable plethora of local events and regional events as well. So the financials that I read about back in January, but that you have reinforced here today, certainly give me an element of confidence that our grant, our help is being well utilised, and that our region is benefiting accordingly. I certainly appreciated the reference to the fulfilment of resolutions. That's very comforting to see, and perhaps that could be rolled out to the whole raft of marina resolutions that go unfulfilled 13 months on. But certainly in terms of the resolutions that were up in front of us as a consequence of today's meeting have been well fulfilled. I'm glad that you're looking at ways that we can function in these uncertain times, because I think that's, again, it's going to be in our Auckland region's interest. So really, Madam Chair, just a comment to actually commend our officers for the way that this cooperation is proceeding, and to the Eden Park Trust for the results that have been delivered on the ground. I think that's a really good story going forward, and I'm sure we'll navigate these difficult times ahead together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Just a brief comment to Mr Bishop, and I wanted to thank you, Mr Bishop, as well as Lee Redshaw and the team for the very good work that you are undertaking. Thank you for your work with the Eden Park Trust Board, the senior management and the board. With respect to the timing, I received the annual report in the post, and I read that, and I answered my mail when that report came through. With respect to the timing, there was the election in the middle, but I think I agree with the officer's comment, and today has been a well-timed occasion for this discussion. So I want to thank you, and I think that this process reflects well upon you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
Just some quick comments, Madam Chair, and I'm looking to the future and the opportunity to bounce back. And I would suggest that in that circumstance, Eden Park has a place to play in Auckland, a very strong place, certainly in New Zealand, in terms of our national stadium, across Australasia, because we may well be in a far better position than Australia, and also globally. So this is a global pandemic. The world is looking at Auckland, and one of the important parts of Auckland and New Zealand is Eden Park. So this is really important to our brand and Auckland going forward. The other comment that I would make, Madam Chair, and I understand the scrutiny of Eden Park, but we know on the basis of what we have been told that by far and away the best investment for Auckland is Eden Park compared to anywhere else. And I would hope that if we're looking at issues around capital and operational expenditure, that we benchmark Eden Park across other stadiums in Auckland, New Zealand, and conceivably elsewhere. And my best guess is that it's right up there at the top globally. So that's my personal view. I'm encouraged at the work that you're putting in to get a level playing field in terms of more content, and the quicker that can happen from my perspective, the better. And I think that the stance that the officers have taken relative to the CCO review and delaying is an entirely prudent one, because we don't want to spend more money when there may be a changed circumstance that will be all the...
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darby.
Thanks. Thank the Trust. I know this is difficult. It's going to be, for all of us going forward, a challenge, but with an enormous challenge, there's an opportunity and to reset your future. So I wish you well, and genuinely so. And look, I probably read the report, your annual report. I know some are assured by the report, but I know this is now upset by COVID-19, but I did note, declines in income and sport event membership functions depreciation. I noted the auditor's comment, the tag on depreciation, right down deep in the report, small lines, but she noted that there's not currently, the organisation is not currently generating sufficient surpluses to cover depreciation. So there's that part. But going forward, Chair, I think we have a responsibility to write a report to support this governance group that poses some questions about what our finance team see in the annual report, because we haven't had anything like that. So I think we have failed, our organisation has failed, and if there's any criticism here today, I have to make it of us, that there should be a report from our team outlining any flags. This is all up. We assumed a $40 million loan and made a $9.8 million grant. This is serious money, and the people of Auckland expect better governance oversight than what I am saying we have had to date. It is not Eden Park's responsibility, it is our responsibility. $50 million. So the next 6 monthly, I really urge the staff and the finance team to write a report that actually interrogates the financials, performance, and the projections. We haven't got that to seed our governance engagement right here today.
Thank you, Councillor. Ladies and gentlemen, I have moved and seconded the recommendations. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we move on to item 9, which is, thank you very much for your willingness and your information. You've done a great job. Thank you. And thank you, John. Now we move into what has actually been some really good news, a 6-month report, Q2 performance report. Of course, it's looking backwards, and look, if you could look through a glass ball, we'd be thinking fantastic. But I would like to, just before we start, draw attention to the executive summary points 4, 5 and 7, showing a really positive financial outcome. But Ross and David, no, that's not Ross and John. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So John and I will talk to the group results for the quarter, and we'll pass over to David Gurney and others to talk about the parent performance and some items within that. So as the Chair has said, this is backward looking. This is the financial performance for the group for the 6 months to the end of December. I think it's useful to think about, as you had a discussion with Eden Park, think about, well, what is the situation you've been through previously? What's the current state of Council's finances as you go towards uncertain territory going forward? So with that in mind, sorry, we can go to the next.
It's all right, I'll do it for you.
Yeah, thanks. So looking at the capital delivery for the group for the 6 months to December, it was a very solid result, a significant ramp up in CapEx delivery, really. So compared to the same period for the group 6 months earlier, 337 million more capital projects delivered. There's almost a 40% increase year on year for the same period. And compared to budget, that was basically in line with budget. So that was with City Rail Link investment included, about 99% of the overall budget delivered for the group, which is quite a significant change from in the past. We're actually been fully delivering the capital program over that period. So significant investment in City Rail Link, but also across Auckland Transport, water care, and within the parent, you'll hear later, around the water quality projects and the America's Cup program. So just moving on to the operating performance for that 6 month period. So again, it was a very strong, a period of very strong performance. So we had direct expenditure, so that's our staff and other controllable costs without interest and depreciation. Basically the spend being on budget, more or less, but the revenue for the group being 7% higher than budget. So that was, a number of factors. Water care revenue was strong, some of the Auckland Transport revenues was strong, and the regulatory income from building resource consents was particularly strong over that period. So that's where we've been. So we move to the next one, which is around debt. I'll ask John to talk about the debt and Treasury position.
Thanks, Ross, and through you, Chair. So net debt as at 31 December was 9.2 billion, and that was up significantly on the 30 June year end, up by 547 million, and that largely reflects the solid delivery on the capital investment program. Net debt to total assets remains about 17%, same as the year-end projection. And if we look at our core debt to revenue ratio, it is at 31 December, that was sitting at 245% against a policy limit of 265%, and under our year-end projection of 253%. Our credit ratings remain as they were, AA Standard & Poor's and AA2 from Moody's, both on stable outlook.
So this last slide for the group. This is the group FTE picture. So as at 30 December, there were 11,100 FTEs for the group. So an increase over that period, over that 6 months, of just under 300 for the group. About half of that is within the parent. A large chunk of that is seasonal workforce. So you think lifeguards, holiday parks, some of those seasonal variations. Also some seasonal increases in RFA and water care, the summer intern program. Also water care has taken on a few extra people related to the work they're doing for the Waikato District Council. That's kind of the overview of the group performance. Happy to take any questions, and if not, we'll move on to the parent.
Thank you, gentlemen. First question, Councillor Cooper.
So I'm not sure whether this will come under the parent or not, but it's just the comment around the fact that we were down on DCs because we delayed payment. We changed the payment mechanism for good reason, to increase housing stock. But with a signalled recession, what will be our ability to actually get that delayed payment, do you think? Do you think this will affect us, people meeting those commitments, as well as the issue of possibly less building consents and less construction?
That's a, I guess, very difficult question to answer. Yes, I guess there is, there's uncertainty in terms of the economic outlook, which means uncertainty for new development activity, and does that create issues for people that have already started building to make their payments over time? Those are all sort of areas of uncertainty going forward.
And so that will be put into our forward planning contingency in terms of the fact that even though people might have already built houses, there may be difficulties in actually receiving for the DCs for the already built homes.
That's something we'll have to think about when we get into our forward budgets in due course.
Right. Any other questions? Your Bishop?
Yeah, this is kind of a surreal discussion because we're looking back. Looking back, it becomes increasingly pleasant compared to looking forward. But obviously, congratulations on the way in which the budget has been managed, and you've got us in a strong position. My question might be an unanswerable one, but given the strong position we're in, to what degree of cushioning does that give us as we look forward to what will undoubtedly be a recessionary period? We don't know how long, and will result in obviously a drop in revenue from our side as things like building consents slow down, etc.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So if I look at what we have in place at the moment, if you look at our debt to revenue, we're currently at 245% against our policy limit of 265%. That gives us debt headroom in dollar terms of just over $800 million. Also, from a debt management point of view, we do have in place between 1.2 and 1.3 billion of committed but undrawn bank lines with 10 banks. So that does give us access to additional funds as well.
And sorry, just a supplementary through you, Madam Chair, that liquidity, access to liquidity, it's spread out over a number of banks, obviously, I think 10 or a dozen. Yeah, how secure is that liquidity now, given the change in circumstances that we're looking at?
Through you, Chair, I mean, it's secure as long as the banks are still in existence.
Well, that's pretty secure then, we hope. We hope.
No? Right, now we move then to the parent. We've got David. Kia ora.
Sorry about that. It's pretty much a continuation of the solid performance you've seen in the group results. So I'll start with... Sorry, can you move it on to and to the next slide as well? So capital performance, as you see with the disruption around the city, there's a lot of capital work going on. So far, up until December the 31st, we delivered $294 million worth of CapEx. That's $58 million more than last year and represents 87% of our program up to that point. So it's a very, very strong capital delivery performance. It's driven mainly out of strong progress in America's Cup and water quality projects, so that's a great result. Moving on to the operational performance. Okay, so we have a result at 31st of December of $6 million favourable against our net direct expenditure. Most of that's driven out of increased revenue in the regulatory area, given they've been doing higher than expected volumes of consents as well as more complex consents. Expenditure in the regulatory area has also gone up because of that extra volume, but because of a lot of the work we've done in productivity gains in that area, things such as the scheduling tool they've put in place, the inspections app, those costs haven't gone up enough to offset the revenue, so we've had a net positive result, which is great to see. We've also been seeing some savings in the organisational design work that we've been putting in place. Up to December the 31st, there were $5.5 million worth of savings coming from some of those changes. $4 million or so of which came from the finance division and the changes that have happened there, an extra $1 million coming from people and performance. So those changes are resulting in savings which will hopefully continue on. Okay, in terms of our staff, FTEs, at the end of the year we saw the expected peak in FTEs that we normally see, 6,700 staff. That's mainly from the seasonal workers that peak. That's tracked down, so as expected, we're now down, well, as at the end of February, we're at 6,655 staff, and we're managing that FTE count actively so that it stays within the cap at year end. Our performance measures, we achieved the 19 out of the 30 that were measured. We're still not hitting our performance targets in the regulatory area. However, of those measures, most of them are improving. There's a slight issue of the noise control measure, but staff are looking into that and seeing, they're looking at customer feedback to see where we can improve and hopefully lift that customer satisfaction with the noise control services area. One highlight from the performance measures that I just wanted to point out is the graffiti. 96% of the assets that we surveyed were graffiti free. That's the best result since 2011, so I thought that was something in particular to point out. Just in terms of the highlights, I'm going to invite Mark Denver and Rod Aitken come up soon to take us through what was pretty much the most significant event of the quarter, which was the Sky City fire and our response to that. I think what we'll hear from them is we responded really well, and so that gives us a little bit of confidence looking forward to this next crisis that we have to manage in terms of coronavirus. So I'll invite them up soon. Some other highlights just from the report. We launched a digital platform to report maintenance issues. What that does is it means it makes it a lot easier for members of the public to report problems, and it also takes load off our customer call centre because, of course, they're not calling the complaints through or the maintenance issues through. And it also, because it's linked to My Auckland, means that our customers can now also track online how we're responding to those issues they're raising. So There's a nice piece of technology that we launched. We also entered into a long-term partnership with EcoGas to process our weekly food scraps. It's quite a nifty process, actually. It produces biogas, which will then power greenhouses. It enriches the soil as part of the process, so it's a nice way of contributing to a sustainable food supply. So quite like that neat little value chain that we've got going on. And all in all, one of the I guess macro measures that we look at in terms of how well we're doing is the media sentiment scores. And again, we've achieved the highest score that we've achieved in December, 55%. So that gives us a general kind of feel of how I guess the general public, the media, are looking at us. So that's good news too. But now I'll hand over to Rod and Mark Denver to talk about the response to the Sky City fire.
Thank you, David. Puts us in a very good financial situation so far. Thank you. Gentlemen.
Through the chair. What I'd like to take you through very quickly is just really, I suppose, how as an organisation we cope with a fairly interesting event right across the road. The first part is, we played a role really, so as you can see from this slide, lots of agencies involved. We quite rapidly stood up our crisis management team, which was really looking at, as an organisation, how we were responding, especially due to the fact that we urgently needed to close some of our central precincts down as the proximity to the fire. And I've got to say, one of the most surreal events I had through the course of that was a phone call from the fire brigade. There was lots of concern about the floating cars in the bottom of the basement knocking into the actual infrastructure. Trying to figure out what kind of answer you'd have to those types of problems. What I would say is the communication that I think that the organisation went through, its ability to handle a major incident was absolutely tested to the maximum. One of the real key things that came from the organisation was fast and rapid implementation of its business continuity plans. I'd be fair to say we learned a lot through that process, which again I think has put us in fairly good stead for where we are today. I'll just into the next slide. Just really talking a little bit about, I suppose, how the organisation responded. Very rapidly, having emptied the central police precincts, lots of staff then relocated to some of our other facilities outside of the CBD. I really want to comment on workplace strategy, which is part of the corporate property team and ICT working together to provide a more agile workspace for our staff. I think the planning and the work that had already been undertaken in that program of work absolutely set us up for the ability to move very rapidly. We had 2,200 people across those first 2 days working from home with no downtime. They were able to continue functioning within their roles. You'll also see that 70% of the central-based staff moved out into the wider precinct. All through that process, we were quite lucky. We managed to keep all of the services that the community were relying on. We had no outages, and the system stayed up and running nicely. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, people? Councillor Walker.
A general question, and maybe more of a plea. I note the reference to the climate impact statement, and I read the small section, quite small section, under other focus areas. Given the imperative of achieving the 1.5% reduction in to meet our Paris commitments. Is it possible to have more comprehensive reporting through this mechanism? because obviously it goes directly to council and the group, and there are significant financial implications in terms of our investments. If, for example, we're putting money into projects that are locking us into increasing emissions as compared to not, and quite obviously I pick up on the really encouraging situation around, was it eco-gas, which is marvellous. I mean, that's great.
Okay, it's something we'll consider. I think climate, yeah, it's a key strategic focus area, so we'll have a look at that for you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Your Worship?
Yeah, thank you very much for this, and I think it was a good effort by council over that period of time. You mentioned we had 2,200 people working from home, continuing their roles over that period. That was for a period of, what, a couple of days?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Obviously, that could be quite promising in terms of our ability to do so again if COVID-19 gets worse. What lessons do we learn from that period that we might apply for the future?
Some very good lessons through the chair. We've already scaled up at the moment to enable around about 6,500 of our staff to be able to work from home as of today. We're already, I suppose the best lessons we learned was where we needed extra attention in the way we were managing, I suppose, the entire system and the way we were looking after our people. Yeah, we have. I know there is an item coming up around COVID-19, and I'm happy to talk at that in that item as well. But we are quite prepared now with the ability for people to work remotely. We are looking alongside with corporate property about how we use the footprint that we have today with social distancing in mind. We do have numbers of our back office staff who are still tied into working in one of our properties, so we are looking to see how we manage that portfolio. But if we do get to a scenario where we do need to, I suppose, go into full lockdown, at the moment we're pretty advanced on our planning on what that would look like.
And just a supplementary to that, the IT system could cope, as you said, 6,500 people could work from home. That's almost our entire staff, actually, isn't it? But the IT system can cope, and you can give the support necessary for people working in that environment.
Yes, absolutely. We know we can scale that up to about 10,000 people. At the moment, we've only gone to 6.5, and it's a 24-hour turnaround. We believe we can scale that up again. We are looking at the critical systems that the council would, or services that the council would like to continue to run. From an IT perspective, I'm looking at my staff who support those, and we are wrapping extra, let's say, caution and protection around those people.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question is one I always ask, and that's to the OPEX budget for the parent, and how much of that, of the surplus of that goes into the CapEx. So we always borrow less than what our total CapEx budget is. It's normally a percentage. What is that number this time for this first 6 months? Do we have that?
Top of the head, the half-year results to December, there was an operational surplus of 700 million, so that was actually the money that could be diverted through to actually fund other uses such as capital expenditure. Yep. Okay. That was across the group, though. Mm.
Nice group.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through your question around the Auckland Emergency Response Unit in the exercise. It sounded like things went smoothly, but were there any, with having that unit put to test, were there some learnings that we actually took from that we've been able to implement as an improvement?
Again, through the chair. So I'm not part of that particular group, but I know that they have had lessons learned alongside the CMT, which is the crisis management team. We have actually gone out quite formally back into the business around the BCPs and how the business has responded to go and find those learnings, so we can actually, make sure we're instituting any learnings from those.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was planning to ask this question around the COVID item later, but I think it might be important to bring it up now. Item D here, it says we're in a strong financial position, significant debt headroom. That's fantastic. The question that I have is that it is so important for people to know that. So what is our comms plan? How are we getting that out to people?
Well, I guess this report's an important part of that. I know that there's our Auckland article, I think, that will be released after this. Sorry, Madam Chair, you might know.
I'm going to say you're quite right. There will be, following this meeting, there will be a media statement around that.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And obviously, feels a bit weird asking all these questions when everything kind of doesn't exist as much right now. But I guess, obviously staff and their well-being is the number one thing. But if we are making financial decisions, depending on how long this lasts, and it's about the long term and about climate and about everything else, are we ensuring that we're not making knee-jerk decisions? The things like working from home, that's fantastic, 6,500. But if there are investment decisions we could be tweaking to make these long-term changes regardless of what happens. So there's more flexibility. We're not requiring more and more building space. We're not requiring more and more people to drive to or travel to one place every day. I know we're in an emergency kind of situation today, but over the next couple of months, as we can look with a bit more clarity, are you thinking of how, if we are having to make big changes in our spending, if they are long-term, because we've done things forever, but we kind of need to wipe out what we have done and move forward. So I'm just making sure that we're thinking long-term, even in this kind of very, very difficult space for everyone.
Through the chair, I'll just do a quick intro, and then I think Rod's will be a good answer to that. But again, the workplace strategy that corporate property and IT are working on absolutely has that long-term view about the changing nature of work, and therefore the ability for people to be more flexible and what that means from a corporate property footprint. That's absolutely part of the day-to-day conversation that we're having today about whatever we do in response to COVID-19, that we've got a view of what that looks like, for when we come through the end of this process. But I think Rod's probably better to...
Sorry, through the chair. I think there's a couple of things I would say is that there's two aspects to this from our perspective. There's the physical space and the tools, so that's like our workspace and our ICT. And I think we're in the right game on that. We're doing really well. In fact, we might take this opportunity to accelerate those works. So, for example, if there were less people in the workspace, there would be less disruption for people to actually improve the resilience in the workspaces. So we might actually accelerate those works. But the original tenets around the workspace, around the fit-out changes, around the technology upgrades that are self-funded through the program still stand true. As it regards to our people experience and our staff, that's something, of course, we're very focused on through this, that we provide a good experience for our staff and we get them into a mindset around working in more flexible ways. And so the tenets around that still stand true. And in fact, through the fire event and through this now emerging event, that's kind of amping up. So we've been very mindful about our approach to that, about how we communicate to staff, and that's part of a crisis response that through Ian Maxwell that's been coordinated. So I suppose the answer is yes, we have all of those things in mind. The plan from a workplace and technology perspective still stands true, but we're looking to perhaps even accelerate our response as this event comes through.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
It's a question for David. David, it's something you had in one of your slides up there, but also in your report is paragraph 17, which I don't really understand, but I'd like some more explanation about. I'm talking about full-time equivalents, and in the report you say that the increase was offset by, and I quote, a significant reduction in staff from the finance division. Can you tell me a bit more, like how many, what level, and why? That'd be a good start. So the work still needs to be done. Are we doing it smarter, or are we offloaded it somewhere else?
So I can't give you the breakdown of the actual FTE reductions, but around the organisational design work, it's about looking at the way that we structure each of our divisions. We take into considerations things like span of control, the optimal supervisory levels that we need, and that helps us reorganise in a way that means that we can continue service provision at a good level, but it's far more efficient. So the results of that work were, as I said, $5.5 million savings up until the 31st of December. In terms of the redundancies, up until December the 31st, there were 140 people made redundant at a cost of $7 million. But of course, the long-term savings flowing from that will offset that in time. I can get more information prepared if we need more breakdowns.
All right, Councillor. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, through you. That's good to hear about the accelerating stuff regarding the workplace and COVID, because I cannot help but notice how we're still seated like everything is normal. So is it okay to risk our health and they're okay in the public gallery, if they're seating? So just wanted to say that. But my question is around D. I don't understand the debt headroom thing when my understanding is that we can't borrow because we're almost at our credit ratio limit. Yeah, so 260. So dumb question, but going to ask it.
Okay, I'll refer this to John, who's coming up.
Just while he's coming up, I did ask you to be moved. I don't know what happened, but I did ask us to be moved a bit further. Your elbow, I think, Councillor, you meant your elbow. Thank you, yes.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So our debt policy limit is at 265%. So that's debt to revenue, keeping that ratio at or below 265%. As at 31 December, we were at 245%. So we have that 20% of headroom, and that equates in dollar terms at around $800 million.
All right, yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah, but can we just clarify, that's short-term headroom, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the 245 is due to go up to 265 within the space of, within 3 years, probably 2 years.
Or not, depending on what happens.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So based on the modelling pre-COVID-19, it had us going up to 265% in 2 or 3 years. That is correct.
Right.
But that assumes an expenditure pattern before COVID-19.
And from that last LTP, yeah. All right, Councillor, so all right till now. Councillor Cooper.
My understanding is what you didn't say is 265 is a self-imposed limit, 270 is the legal limit over which. So my understanding has always been that 5% between 265 and 70 is then again another real emergency headroom if we really had to use it. So the 265 is self-imposed. I'm not suggesting we should, but given the difficult situation we may, and if we don't get a government council package, which would be very welcome, that...
Yeah. Yes.
Through you, Chair, yes, you're correct, the 265 is self-imposed. The limit we've always talked about through Standard & Poor's is at 270%. So that gives you another additional 200 to 250 million. Now, just to complicate things a little bit further, Standard & Poor's methodology has been recently changed, and they have taken out explicit reference to 270%. So that's gone. Now, that doesn't mean that we can go miles beyond 270% without having any rating action, but it's something over the coming months that we'll have a close look at and see what, if any, additional flexibility we might have.
Yes, just reminding everybody that we're actually talking about what has been to the 31st of December, all right? So what happens next is a subject of further debate, not necessarily right now, all right? I would like to move the recommendations just before, okay, we've got a couple of questions to go. Do I have a seconder, Deputy? Thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just want to ask a question on D as well, following Councillor Bartley's question. why is it in there? Because me looking at D, it leaves it open-ended because it's just telling us we were strong position on the 31st of December 2019. My question to that is, what position are we in now? I'm just trying to sort of see about combining something to the effect that we were in a strong position 31st, but staff will come back to the Finance and Performance Committee with any updates in regards to our position. From my perspective, it's open-ended.
I'll answer that. The reason is we are in an interesting time, and I suppose it's stating the fact that at the 31st of December we're in a good financial position. We will deal with what happens next in the next item and potentially this afternoon and day by day. But actually what we want to say is we weren't close to the wire at the 31st of December. We were okay, so no need for panic.
Understand.
We've got some headroom.
I understand that.
That was the reasoning behind the resolution.
Having the ability to, so then when the public read it, that we will be updated in regards to any of our positions moving forward as a result of the pandemic we're in. I don't want to put all that in, but the fact that we will be updated just
that's E really. That's what E says, give or take. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, combined.
So let's get on to where we're going, shall we? So we've got a mover and a seconder. I think I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Against, carry. I know I can come back, councillor, that we have to let Ian go for an urgent meeting at midday, and he is part of the extraordinary business. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And we'll come back to you too, Mr Taipuri.
I mean, we come back. I don't know what that means.
Well, just wait and see. Mr Maxwell, would you like to come forward? As I mentioned right at the beginning, we are in unprecedented times, and I think it's really important for you all to have confidence with the people that you're talking to and with Aucklanders of where we're going and what we're doing about the situation we currently find ourselves in. So both the performance of Auckland Council and its finances. So let's start with you, Ian.
Look, thank you. Look, I know we had a discussion yesterday at a workshop, and I'll cover similar sorts of issues, but this is a fast-moving situation and things have changed since we spoke yesterday. So I'll run through sort of in general where we are. So obviously the COVID-19 issue is a huge issue for our country and our city and ourselves and our organisation, and it's going to be an issue we're all going to have to focus on. We're working very closely with central government, so we're hand in glove. We're looking to central government for guidance and decision making in the sense of sort of the major decisions that impact our community, and then we're looking to implement those. We're still very much in the stamp it out stage, so the view is that it is not, that the virus is not moving within our community, people to people. It's all of those that have tested positive have been associated with overseas travel, and there was a number of those that were announced yesterday, and there will be some more today. And most of those cases are in Auckland, although not all. We are expecting some directives today, or perhaps tomorrow, around more detail with respect to mass gatherings and others. So these will be in more detail describing particular events, and we think potentially a reduced number, less than the 500. So that will have impacts upon some of our activities as well. So we are looking to the Ministry for Health as our lead agency. They are the organisation that have the public health expertise, and we're taking their material and using that. We have two primary roles. One of those is around the all-of-government response to the pandemic, and so that's managed through the Auckland Emergency Management Office. And I picked up some of the discussion earlier about perhaps the lessons from the fire, and there have been lessons, and there are improvements as a result of the experience last year. So, you know, some of these things that come along actually bring benefits later on. But the sort of issues that have been dealt with there are things like Lifeline. So our team in the Auckland Emergency Management Office is working not only with water care around water supply, but also electricity companies, fuel companies, the supply of food into the city, those sorts of things. And we've also just recently, last couple of hours, received a request for some expertise sitting within our organisation, environmental health officers, to actually join the Ministry for Health to sort of support their operations. So that's the type of thing that we can expect to take place over the next sort of few days and weeks as we head into this, that we are an organisation with some skill sets that are useful, and as part of that, all of government response will be expected to play our part. The second area that we're focusing on is our organisation itself. And here again, when I say our organisation, I'm not just talking about the council parent, I'm talking about right across the council group. So we're working together as a sort of an integrated team. Each of us obviously have particular focus around whether it might be water supply or transport or waste or whatever. But it's in terms of managing our staff and our general approach, then there's a consistent approach, so that people within, for example, the front counters serving Auckland Transport companies, customers, will be adopting a similar sorts of approach to people serving in our regulatory services on the frontline counter. So we're trying to get as much consistency as possible across that. We're sending out all of those key messages, which you've all heard: washing your hands, social distancing, all of those sorts of things. Mark made a very good point about working from home just now. So we are working hard to ensure that a large proportion of our staff can work from home, and Mark's team, ITC, have done a fantastic job in enabling up to 6,000 people. That's been a significant effort over a short period of time. He did highlight, however, that not all of our staff will be able to work from home. So we have a large clump of people who are quite able to work from home, but we have others that for their needs need particular software, which is difficult to access at home because of capacity issues, or they may need to do work which involves large screens and those sorts of things. So they will need to remain within our workplace, or at least part of the time. It's quite possible they could come into our workplace once a week. So we're working through that process now. We have a register of staff who are self-isolating. That's slowly increasing. So we're now, as today, right now, we stand at 55 staff, so up a little bit from yesterday. We're also, as part of the Auckland community, our staff can be expected to be tested, and they are. So we have a small number of staff that are subject to testing right now. To date, we've had no positive tests, but that will change. As our community increases, we can expect those things to occur within our own staff. So all overseas travel has been cancelled. All domestic travel has been significantly reduced, just essential, and it'll be at a very low level. We're looking at splitting teams. So your executive leadership team is an example, but there are many others across our organisation and ITC and the Auckland Emergency Management Office, a whole range of teams that are deemed to be significantly important for the delivery of services will be split. And the reason for that is we don't want them all to disappear if we get one case. And so that's learning on the experience of North Shore Hospital, where they lost 44 odd staff as a result of one case. So we're very much picking up on that experience. And Auckland Transport, Watercare are all doing exactly the same thing, with the objective of ensuring that services are retained. So in terms of impacts, so you'll be aware that events have all been cancelled, and that may actually grow in the next day or two. We are experiencing loss of patronage across quite a range of our services, so things like pools, gymnasiums, libraries. With the closure of many of our sports activities, obviously our sports parks are getting less use. We have some supply chain issues. So what that means is that projects, whether they be capital projects or technology projects, those sorts of things, are starting to come up against issues about materials, equipment, skill sets, if we are looking to particularly use overseas people to provide some advice in those areas. Our consenting activity is slowing, so you'd expect the building industry to suffer the same sorts of issues as general projects, so starting to run into issues about supply of equipment and materials, that type of thing. But the magnitude is not large enough to really identify the the clear implications of that. So we know it's happening. We can look overseas and think about where it might end up. And this is exactly the same situation as Auckland Transport and others might be in. We just don't know the impact. We know it's happening on the edge. We can see it, but we don't know the extent of it. We're currently working on a business continuity plan. So we've identified those services that Aucklanders will require in a severe situation, in a lockdown situation. So that includes things like water, wastewater, waste, refuse, a level of transport, cemetery services, keeping our animals alive at the zoo and the farms and dog pounds and so forth, consenting. So we've identified a range of services which are nowhere near the extent of services that we provide now, which are key and important. And even though I might say transport services, it's probably not the transport service as we know it today. It'll be some variation of it. So we're under a legal obligation to provide services to a level that we can, and so our teams are working hard to actually achieve that. We're also working on a scenario which is less severe. So this is a situation where we might have 20% less capacity. So both those scenarios are due to be completed by our groups in the next day or two, and so by early next week we will have an opportunity to look at that overall business continuity plan from an organisational wide perspective. So I know that's very brief. It just builds on a little bit what we spoke about yesterday, but look, if there's any questions, I'd be pleased to respond.
Look, thank you very much. This is a daily moving feast, and I think it's important that we get regular updates. Ian does have to go shortly, so I'm going to split this bit into two. So just on these, you can stay for a while? Oh, that's great. But questions? We have Councillor Hills, Member Taipari.
Thank you so much, and thank you and the team for really ramping up and changing things really quickly. We talked about it quite a bit yesterday, but I just want to check again how we're going to support our staff, potentially their families, losing jobs, things like that, and the wider Auckland public with mental health and wellbeing. I have real concerns how we can, like in our releases yesterday and the day before, like we should be having helplines there. I know there's the COVID specific, but this may be extremely tough on, or will be extremely tough on many people and their families. Hopefully council, I assume revenues and jobs will stay as well contained as we possibly can if we're sharing resource. But yeah, if we can try and put up more well-being and access, but also how we will help our staff connect. So if we have everyone alone at home, that can be quite tough as well. So I know right now we're thinking about services and cleaning and things like that, but how do we spread opportunities if it lasts for a long time of connecting, of Skype not for work reasons, but for mental health reasons?
So just very briefly, people who are self-isolating at home, we've set up a register for those folk, and that register is a basis for people who might be working from home in the future. And so we will be able to have an ability to maintain contact with those folk working at home. And look, our employee assistance programs, the utilisation of that has grown in the last couple of weeks. So your point about mental wellbeing and so forth is an issue. In terms of the overall impact in our community, certainly the Ministry for Health are looking at exactly those sorts of issues, and in a way where we are focusing on, I suppose, our people more than the wider population. But I know the Ministry for Health are definitely looking at the wider population, and it may be that we have a contribution to make for that, but it's unclear at the moment.
All right. Member Taipari.
Oh, kia ora, Madam Chair. It's going to take a little bit of your leave and try and kill it with one stone before I leave. And simply is this, just on the previous item, I wanted to say about congratulations around meeting Māori outcomes across 44 initiatives, 14.1 million of 14.3 million budget, so that's tremendous. What's the concern is a little bit is the delays that are notified next to most of those projects, so I probably won't get that. I guess the other thing that I just want to qualify is about not ending up where we were last year and only spending 50%. But the reportage that we got to 31 December, which I acknowledge that period, I was very happy with in the context of that. Leads me then to this matter in terms of funds that may be available to support strategies around COVID-19. And although I'd like to spend a lot of time on it, I'd like this council to be seriously consider about the use of marae investment funds and cultural investment funds around supporting marae for products and the like to support the cleanliness, the ability to receive people if that's what happens, and that seen as community facilities for the wider community. So I'd like to see the ability for managers operationally to be able to have some delegation around supporting marae around that with the intent of looking after everyone in the community. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you.
So we actually had I'm not sure, we had a meeting yesterday with I think 40 odd marae, and so the points you raise are absolutely valid and will be part of our strategy.
If I may just a little, I raised this a little bit earlier. I thought I'd do it quietly through democracy, but I want to point out to you, as we talk about anti-COVID-19 strategies, the thing I've observed today, and not to alarm anybody, but the desk there is probably the biggest transmission space in the room, where everybody's coming up using the same microphones, using the same PowerPoint devices. There's not any cleaning things for them, no wipes, no sanitizer. So they all spend longer than 15 minutes at that table. And it's probably my training in China of anti-COVID-19 studies. But honestly, I was going to leave it as democracy, but you're responsible. You talk about yourselves in your own space. I actually pushed everyone away today, and I'm pretty comfortable. But to the people that do all the good things for us, we are putting them in a space that is really, really dangerous without any help and support to them. So I just wanted to say that to you, Madam Chair, not just for this committee, but everybody, the governing body, in terms of its meeting it has. You got to do as you say you're going to do. Thank you.
Kia ora, and thank you for that, and point noted. Very appreciate your comments. Thank you. Now there is. Yes. So thanks to Member Taipura, really. Councillor Henderson.
Kia ora, thank you, Madam Chair, and I reserve my right to speak on this item. So we've heard the strong position that we have going into this, and we've also heard today around the rating agencies and potentially relaxing the 270, which sounds quite encouraging. We don't fully know the economic impacts, but they are likely to be severe, is what we've heard. So as part of that is that it's important for us as leaders within the community that we can clearly communicate that we have this sorted. So I've kind of asked this question in the previous item, but I want to go into a bit more detail. Could you talk us through the comms plan for COVID-19? And a follow-up question is, how can councillors stay involved so that we're leading from the front in our communities?
So the comms plan for COVID-19 there's a national plan, and we're fitting in with that. So you will, if you haven't already, there's quite a significant increase in communication managed through the Ministry for Health, etc. So that's and our communications are reflecting that. So we are taking their material, their messages, and replicating that within our own organisation and material. So we're not reinterpreting that type of material. But that's largely about health and how you protect yourself and what self-isolation means and so forth. So beyond that, within our organisation, we are using our Auckland as a mechanism to get out to our community. We're also using a website, and we're using, particularly inside our organisation, the single most important channel is Kotahi, that's that intranet site, and that's being updated. In fact, all of those areas are being updated, in some cases twice a day, in terms of the messaging and so forth. We've also gone through our membership databases for things like libraries and gymnasiums, and so material is going out by email to all of those members outlining what's occurring within, for example, libraries in terms of how they will operate. So those are the primary mechanisms that we're using.
I can understand that, but just the sort of follow-up question around how councillors are staying involved specifically, and how can we help and translate that out to our communities? Okay. Yeah.
All right, sorry. Look, it's I haven't got a response to that right here, but I can get something. I can have Dan Lambert come and talk to you about I know he's put his mind to it. This is one of the issues that we're trying to address as we sort of progressively go through this. So look, I can't answer that here and now.
Just to add to that, I know that the Mayor and myself both are making sure that something will come out pretty regularly to councillors. So, I mean, whilst we have this meeting and we're going to have one next month, there will be a whole lot of work in between as things change every single day.
Actually got a daily briefing coming to each of you. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Councillor Watson.
So, I mean, just following on from some of the earlier questioners there, we had a little bit of a dummy run with this with the water crisis in parts of Auckland. Certainly what I'd like to see is a lot more utilisation of signage and key locations. Our Auckland might be the go-to for some parts of the community and us, but for an awful lot it's not, and they wouldn't even know where our Auckland is. So we do have numbers of communities that are very well positioned in terms of movable signage at council-owned hoarding sites or with movable signs. So I'd just like to put that on the record. And the other, and I know it's very early days, but in relation to Councillor Hill's question, very good question about mental health and well-being of both our staff and the wider Auckland community, given that around the world cities are taking the lead in this too. It's not just national directives, so if you look in America in particular, but in terms of putting out that positive message, and this is borne by experiences in China, where resilience has been encouraged, kind of positive stories in terms of the opportunities that this has presented for communities outside of the normal run of affairs, which are actually quite uplifting. And I noticed the Australian Prime Minister, for instance, was very critical of the mass hysteria that's occurring in some of the shopping centres and things over there, calling it un-Australian. I don't know if it was un-Australian, but he certainly said it was. I think in amongst the clear communication of facts and guidance, there is important to communicate uplifting types of view of this crisis in terms of resilience, people working together, people taking opportunities that wouldn't otherwise exist in their life. And I think it's important that goes out rather than the steady diet of negativity. Even, you know, it's a fundamentally negative experience, but it's important to signal how other communities like the Chinese have overcome this to a degree and how we can rise up. I think that's important for our overall psyche.
Yeah, thank you. I like your positivity. Well done. Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Good afternoon, Ian, and thank you very much for your stewardship of this matter. I know that this work is being done, but when you do have a moment, and when time provides, I would like some more detail in terms of the support that is being provided to ensure the safety and the well-being of frontline staff working in a couple of areas, primarily in environmental health, animal management, noise control, food safety, and also staff who are operating counters for walk-up services for the public. I think that that's important because there will obviously be other areas within the council, but I see those areas in particular as being particularly challenging for staff working in those particular areas. So when you do have some time, if you could provide some information to us, because for my assurance, I would like to think that those staff, because we do have to maintain business continuity, but I can see the risks, the unreasonable risks for those staff, and we do need to try and manage those risks. So I'm sure that you're triaging this matter within the organisation, but if we get some advice in the not too distant future, I'll be very grateful.
Certainly do that. We're working on that very issue, and Auckland Transport have similar issues with their bus drivers and their parking wardens.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to... I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask about... Oh, actually, that's what it was. Thank you for the memo that came out from Dan Lambert regarding comms. That is really awesome. So thank you, Ian and Stephen, for that. And I'm guessing that that's like an open channel for us to figure out how we do this, because it is unprecedented. and that there's an opportunity for us as councillors to show some leadership within our own communities using our comms. So thank you for that. I wanted to also ask about our gathering places, because we're still having groups. I've got one group of elderly that are using the library to run their program. How are we making sure that our libraries and our gyms are safe for them to use, even though they still push ahead and meet there?
That is an issue. Over the next few days, I think we're likely to see meetings, particularly of elderly people, not take place. So we're now looking at, we've looked at the mass events, the bigger events. We're now looking at the smaller events. And to be fair, meetings involving people who are more susceptible, we'll be actively discouraging.
And I wanted to ask one more thing. I know this is out there, but it is unprecedented times. And the thing that I see that makes our communities most vulnerable is food. Like, people are panic buying. I was at Glenelg's Pick and Save last night, and they're just going bananas. And I know that we're currently in court regarding the local alcohol plan with the supermarkets. But is there any way that council can work with our supermarkets to limit what is being sold? I know this is out there, but trying to draw on whatever levers of influence we have.
So there is power, but it's not with council, it sits with central government. This is quite an extreme power that they do have, that they could call upon to effectively manage food or other items. So in a significant natural disaster, you might see fuel rationing, for example. So it's that sort of power that could be called on. I'm not sure if they're thinking of doing that. Certainly some of the supermarkets have already started their own sort of rationing type concept, but it isn't something that council has the ability to actually empower or require from the supermarkets.
Good question, though. Councillor Casey.
Thanks, Ian. It's a nice segue into my question, which is, my observation is that older people are staying home. They are not coming out, and that will only get worse. That means that we've lots of vulnerable elderly people feeling lonely and quite mystified at what to do with themselves. And I want to know exactly how we are focusing to make sure that those people are looked after. So we're very good at that, but I need a plan. We're an age-friendly city. I know it hasn't happened yet. I need to know it's on your agenda.
So we don't have a plan for I have a plan for those older people in housing that is associated with Auckland Council. So this is the housing for the elderly, Haumaru housing. So we've been working with the manager there about stepping up their, their care for those folk, but I haven't got to the point of looking across the city yet.
Okay, just on communications, it might not be the online communication through our Auckland that does it for that group. And that I need you to be thinking about how we're going to communicate our messages to them.
Some of the, actually picking on the comment made earlier about successes, there have been successes in overseas situations where there's been a general encouragement about go see your neighbour, check on them, and particularly for elderly who may not be able to, or maybe not be confident or able to get to shopping and so forth, to actually take on that role. And I think that's probably where we're at. I don't think there's going to be a cavalry or a service that's going to go out and help these folk. I think it's going to be at a neighbour level, and to try and encourage that and give good stories about how that can work. And in a way, that's an opportunity that this issue presents. I think that's probably the most likely methodology, and that's something we can promote and help. But it does rely on individuals going next door and checking out their neighbours and setting up some sort of relationship.
Thank
you. In the upcoming messages, it's going to be.
It's definitely in the plan.
And thank you, Kathy. And the other thing is, of course, we did ask for staff to liaise with mainstream media, including radio, which is quite often a service that the elderly do use quite often. So we're linking in with the central government messaging around that too. So thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. As I said yesterday, Ian, I got interviewed on Radio Wātia on Monday, and they specifically asked around marae. And that's the reason for the question. So I've just spoken to and emailed John D. because I think the funds that he has under his portfolio, for want of a better term, I believe could be used to upgrade those marae that we as council will end up possibly utilising if the situation gets as bad as what we're hearing or what we're seeing seeing overseas. So I think it is really integral. So Ian, I just wanted to, again, around this messaging, will that end up getting back to the councillors who have possibly marae in their area that could be utilised? I think it's important that that comes back. So can you assure us that that will happen? Two, around the messaging as well. I know that on, I forget which morning program it was, but the CEO of Foodstuffs sort of was on there saying that, look, the supply chain that we have, there is no issue around the supply chain. He said it's fine, it's working because we've allowed those the goods to be in there. So again, it's about the messaging. I know that Auckland Council is not responsible for that, but we could be at least in the loop to put it out into our comms, in regards to what's been said. So look, those are really the comments and questions. Sorry, Chair.
I can assure you about the issue around marae. So we've already started meeting. To be fair, I think there's 4 marae across the city that have closed their doors. So people running those facilities have a choice, and so some have made that choice, but others have not. So we are working with, I think it was 38 marae we met with.
Councillor Mulholland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ian and the team, for the fabulous work you've done on the information that means that we can share with our community. My question to you is, how's the local board, how are the local board meetings, public aspect of those meetings, being managed? What processes in place to ensure that we are following the Ministry of Health and or Council guidelines, because there are small spaces and sometimes a large number of people. So I would just like to ask you that and seek your response as to how that public meeting process is taking place moving forward.
Thank you, through the Chair. So our Democracy Services Division have looked at exactly that issue, and indeed the issue of the governing body as well, in terms of how it might meet now, and if we get to a really bad situation, how decisions might be made. So there's a gradual process there. We're doing exactly the same with local boards. So that material, I've seen a draft of it. I'm sure it'll be out in the next day or so. So look, it's some of these things which I suppose in normal times might take 3 months to produce, we can do it in a day and a half. And it may not be perfect, but often in situations like this, perfect is the enemy of the good, and we need to get stuff out. So it's coming.
Okay, it's surprising how efficient we can be, isn't it, when we're under pressure? Councillor Walker.
A comment rather than a question, so I'll reserve the right to.
Councillor Bartley, did you have another question?
Oh, no, it was a comment as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Right, we'll go on to comments then. Councillor Walker, Councillor Bartley.
Sure. And first of all, I just want to pick up on the comment or the question that Councillor Watson was making around obviously stories and things that people need to be told to break them out of what might be a negative cycle. And I would suggest that Auckland Council has got an incredibly strong role to play there. I would suggest that we're capable of doing the right stuff, and arguably, assuming that we're probably the biggest employer in the Auckland region, if not, we must be very close to it. So if we're retaining our staff, we're providing stability, and that runs through our supply chains, because that multiplies the number of people that are dependent on us, and that is probably something that runs into the tens of thousands. We can have a huge impact on Auckland and obviously New Zealand. Quite obviously, if we can have workarounds around events and we can rebound quickly, then they are really positive things that we can do. I would hope, and I would just emphasise around our role as it goes to business and employment, that in respect of future updates, we're not just going to be reactive, but proactive.
Absolutely.
Because if ever there's an organisation in Auckland that can be proactive, it's us. We've got the capacity, we've got the teams, we've got the council leadership, we've got local boards, we've got our CCOs that are on board. If we're all pulling together, we can make really good things happen.
Thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you. My comment was just really keen to link in the coordinate the responses that are happening in the community in regards to our vulnerable people out there, especially the elderly, because there is already stuff happening. In Tamaki, we're working with Tamaki Regeneration Company to identify households, tenants that are in those vulnerable situations and getting food to them, so they're not having to go into the supermarkets and get trampled and end up buying nothing. So there is a lot already happening. Very keen to link that in with you after this meeting and make sure it's coordinated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Your Worship.
Yeah, just to reinforce, I think, some of the sensible things that have been said around the table. We seem to have two challenges. One is a challenge that there is a group of people in our community who aren't taking it seriously. And I don't know whether you saw the guy, don't know whether he was a Kiwi or a visitor, but saying, oh, they'll have to find me first as he came through the airport. Boy, I let out a string of expletives at that. That is so utterly irresponsible. And we should be very supportive of when we have a requirement to isolate for 14 days, which came, I think, at a really appropriate time, that we've got to reinforce that message. Our social norm has to be that people have got to behave responsibly, and when they don't, we've got to call them out. The other opposite end of that spectrum is the people who are, the other example was St. Patrick's Day, and you saw on the Herald all of these people kind of drunkenly leaning on each other. God loves the Irish, but to be sure. But that is the exact opposite of the behaviour that we're promoting, and we need to do that through the media, and the media probably needs to call it out as well. The opposite end is the people who are panicking. And, we saw the fistfights in Australia, and I identify with Councillor Watson's comments on that. But we saw a run on it here. The message is, as Councillor Filipaina said, the one that's coming through from the supermarkets is there is no threat to our supply chain for those basic necessities. There'll be a bit of a run on hand sanitiser, and probably I don't appreciate the fact that that seems to have trebled in price, but for the main things that we need, there is no threat. So it's finding that balance. Yes, we've got to take this really seriously, but panic is a very negative reaction and is utterly unhelpful. I just think that whenever any of us get the opportunity to do any media work on this, just to reinforce the messages that are coming through from the Ministry of Health. I said yesterday, and I think I picked it up from Ian Maxwell actually, our role is to follow the advice of the Ministry of Health, not to reinterpret it. They have the expertise there. I'm confident in that expertise, and we've got to keep pushing those things. We're doing it at the level of our staff, and I'm confident from what we've heard from Ian and others that we're changing behaviour there. We're doing, if more people working at home, more space within the offices, having that social distancing, the paper towels in the toilets and all of those other things, they are really important. And I want to pick up Councillor Hill's comment, mental health. I saw a piece of advice from a mental health expert. How do you protect yourself against anxiety about coronavirus? Stop listening to the media. And there is a bit of an element in that, is overstating the point. But people, if you get this, it's a new thing for a whole generation of New Zealanders that we're faced with the biggest health threat that we've faced. Probably since 1918, and at the same time we're faced with the worst, potentially the worst economic situation since the 1930s. And we've got to be real about that, but we've got to bring an element of positivity in it as well. And the positivity that I'm seeing coming out of China at the moment is that they had one new domestic case of coronavirus the day before yesterday. And they're actually getting more from people coming into China than they are creating domestically. It's kind of ironic that they've now adopted the rules that they criticised that when we adopted those rules about keeping people out. We will be getting some. Look, I'm reasonably confident that the government is keeping a step ahead of the curve. We'll be getting new advice this afternoon. I suspect that 500 is far too big a gathering to tolerate in the current environment, and I think that will come back pretty severely. We have to consider, but should not act prematurely on things such as the British have done. They've closed their schools until summer, which is pretty radical. Now, that was a big step from what they were saying before, just let it develop its own natural immunity, which they then got a report on to say, yes, you've just consigned 500,000 people to death. I think we're balancing our approach at the moment, but we have to be ready to move with the time. Things change in 24 hours. And, you know, we'll have more cases today, I've got no doubt. But when we see, well, I'll say when, because I think it will happen, so a higher level of transmission within our city and country, then we're going to have to step up those efforts. But timing, I think, is everything on that. So let's be precautionary. Let's send the message out. This is serious. Take it seriously. But however, there is light at the end of the tunnel, because you don't want to create a sense of total depression in people. God, this is all hopeless. It's not at that point at the moment. And, you know, and those that get coronavirus, 80% will just have minor symptoms of it. But we have to look after our elderly and our vulnerable. I think those are the messages. We are not going out to say things contrary to what Ministry of Health is, but we need to reinforce and repeat their messages. I think that's the best thing in answer to Shane Henderson's question that we can do.
Thank you, Your Worship. Talking about Shane Henderson, Councillor.
Kia ora. Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Mr Mayor. I really want to echo your sentiment to say that now is not the time for panic. I want to start by thanking staff for their hard work and their flexibility in adapting to a rapidly evolving situation. Thank you, Ian, and your team, doing a wonderful job. I also want to say that as leaders, we'll be working strongly with staff and the community to be the calm and collected group that our community needs to be. Financially, we are solid, we are responsible and in a good place. As leaders, we'll be able to provide confidence for our communities that we'll make prudent decisions to protect our communities and to recover. This is a leadership test for us at the table. Financially, hard decisions may need to be made for our city, and we stand ready to make those decisions. We have plenty to talk about in our economic outlook as a council and as a city, and the Chair and I have discussed this, that we propose to look at meeting more regularly as finance and performance to handle those details as they arise. I just want to reiterate that Council's books are healthy going into this. A legacy of prudent financial management and debt control that stands us in good stead. So ultimately, let's stay positive. I look forward to future discussions around a recovering economy in Auckland, where we can make our city a fairer place with more local work available and a place which is more sustainable with climate change resilience at its heart. Mā whero mā pango ka o te ai te mahi. Kia ora and thank you.
Well said. Thank you. Councillor Hills.
Yeah, just want to first, once again, thank all our staff and each other. I think, you know, we don't want to put a downer, but it is going to be, and it is already very difficult for a lot of people. And I hope that we, as councillors, don't put undue pressure on our staff to do things like write out press releases and things like that. I think it's up to us to find the Ministry of Health information and copy and paste that through our own channels. I don't think we need people to be focusing on our needs. I think we just need to keep pushing out the messages from the right people, and if that's just constantly the Ministry of Health or the Prime Minister or the Mayor, then that's fine. I think our communities are relying on us to get the information out, but not confuse the information and not argue about that information. I do keep bringing up mental health because I think that it is after the virus and the economic, I think mental health is my biggest concern, what it means for our communities. You know, we see through downturns, we see through unemployment, we see through those sorts of things that it does cause a lot of undue pressure on a lot of people who may not be used to pressure. This is going to be fast and quick, the downturn, but as Councillor Henderson says, I hope that it brings opportunity and support and we can do things as a council and as a country quicker and maybe give people the support we should have been giving them a long time ago in a much easier way, because we have some of that politics out of the way and we just do the right thing. So I will admit, and I think that it's important for all of us to admit if we're feeling not great. I got a bit upset in the Mayor's office on Monday, and thank you, Desley, for supporting me through that and others. But I think it's important for us to admit we're anxious, overwhelmed, upset. I hope the staff are speaking to their managers and asking how to seek help, because we are putting a lot of pressure, and you're all putting a lot of pressure on your own teams to change everything in 1 week, and also be able to ask each other ideas and get into, a lot of our staff will have partners, family who are losing jobs, and a lot of our staff have family overseas who are very stressed and very worried. So I want us to keep putting that collective hug, but not a physical hug, unfortunately, around each other, but just acknowledge that when we're feeling stressed and annoyed, or maybe we didn't get that email we wanted, or whatever, that just to sit back for 5 minutes and think how we're all coping through this as a council, CCOs, as political politicians, but also our community. This is not going to be easy at all, but I think if we all just chill and really look deeper than the small issues that we might find are issues, and really put our trust in our leaders and the people around here, going hallway to hallway, and having those small discussions with people and our CSAs and others. It's a lot of stress, but people are really, really trying to do the right thing. And I think we'll definitely get through this, but it's going to get probably pretty bad before it gets a lot better. So just want to also reach out to us around the table. Got to put politics aside here and look out for each other. And we don't have to be tough. So just make sure that you're admitting how you're feeling throughout this. So thank you all, and a special thanks to all our staff and contractors and everyone else who are doing their best to change everything and help everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. I guess there's a few things. One is, I do think I've just had a text from a friend of mine who just said, gone to Countdown, it's absolutely going crazy. People are just ripping stuff off the shelves. And I think when people feel that their survival is challenged, they do behave like that. It is human behaviour, unfortunately. And I think that that's part of our job, and I think, as Councillor Henderson said, as leaders, to help people get through this in a calm way. And there's a really good publication that's just come out from the Mental Health Foundation, which taught a whole lot of tips about how we try and keep it together, because it is important that we do keep calm, but you can kind of see why people worry. If I don't have a job, will I have enough money to buy anything next week? So I'm going to get it now. So I'm not condoning that, but I can understand it. But I do, we need to heed what the supermarkets are saying. There's plenty of supplies of things. We make toilet paper here in New Zealand. We don't need to worry about that, and we can get the things we need. I want to commend our staff, and I want to say to Stephen Town, what a way to go out, really, having to deal with this. Not what he planned, I'm sure, to leave the organisation, but I know that obviously he's really empowered his staff to be making these really big calls around events, around our services, getting our buildings up to speed really quickly, and I really commend all of you. It makes us look good, because you are doing all the work. One of the things I want to talk about too is we've just had something very close to home, 2 incidents, one in Te Aratu Peninsula yesterday with 2 French tourists gaily, doing their shopping in the supermarket and then going to a local cafe to sit down and have a meal. And I really wanted to commend the Te Aratu Peninsula community for actually calling the police and attending to those people, because that's the kind of terrible behaviour that we don't need from visitors coming in here. And I hope that everybody's okay there. And the other one is my mum at 80 is one of the more vulnerable people in the community, and I know that some of us still have our mums and dads around. She goes to our local council gym, and I rang her and said, Mum, did you go to the gym today? She said, no, I've decided to self-isolate. I'm not going to the gym, and my 90-year-old friend round the corner is doing the same. And I think the biggest thing for all of us is to, make sure we're calling our family. And what I've seen is really heartening is on our community Facebook pages, people are reaching out and saying if there are people that need calling, people that need things delivering. And I think while these things can bring out the worst in us, they can also bring out the best in us. And I think our job as leaders is to really encourage that. And one of the things that Councillor Henderson and I are going to do is go and work from our local board offices. We're going to go to one each every few days so that we don't have to share a little office. But go to those and just let it be known that if people want to come and talk, or, just showing that visibility that we're not running away from anything and that we are going to make sure people are looked after. And I think that's something, I'm sure we'll all take on. Those are the things we can do, and we're the fortunate ones. We will still have our jobs, but that means that we're strong because we don't have to worry about any of that. We just have to worry about our communities and look after them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Thanks to our team, Chief Executive and the Executive Leadership team for the incredible work that they are doing, and government as well. I'm just commending every action that I see by the government and ourselves, Auckland Council, I'm phenomenally impressed. Going forward, I think, there's the health response, and that's the priority, and everybody has covered that, and there's a social response too, and Councillor Hills is right to highlight the welfare of vulnerable people, and I think that's been extremely well expressed. Probably what I wanted to express is, without diminishing any importance of the public health response now, is, and the Mayor's referred to the challenges, I'm actually interested in the opportunity as well. There will be an opportunity to grow this nation, to grow Auckland out of this. And I've just been reading some articles about companies, the private sector, hunkering down and beefing up their R&D units. This isn't a time where you can't sell products, or you can't sell products and services to the same extent. So you refocus and you get your teams working on the future, the post-COVID life, so to speak. And so I guess my message is to our organisation, to all of us, is to deal with the health response and be responsible in that area, and we will, but to also not be blind to what we could get out of this for Aucklanders and for New Zealanders. As a nation-type city we are. And so this could be, as it was termed yesterday by Nick Hill, this could be our moment to audition for the future and audition ideas in a very different way. We've got climate change that we know about now. This could be our opportunity to hinge on that immediate call to action on the back of the COVID urgency. So here's an opportunity moving forward where we, instead of just getting back to business as usual as we see off COVID-19, we get back to business that looks really different, that matches the future, that we could map a totally new path for. So that's my message. But again, I take my hat off to all those in the Auckland Council organisation who are working massive hours at the moment, double overtimes to address this, and the government leading the nation. It's extraordinary times, but there's also an extraordinary opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, just before I move and hopefully get a second deputy on this issue, I'll draw the debate to a close. From my perspective, I think it's important as governors of the city that we have confidence that as a council, we are handling this both professionally, competently, and appropriately. And I think you'll find that by listening to Ian today, backed up by the finance people and by Stephen, that is indeed what is happening. This isn't the first update we will get, and it certainly won't be the last. And whilst the resolution talks about a next update coming next month, we will have F&P again next month. Please be aware that you will be getting daily updates. but this is our public council committee meeting when we deal with this kind of stuff in the open. So I wanted that opportunity. It wasn't on the agenda, as you can appreciate, because we didn't know it was happening when the agenda got put together. So again, I'd like to reiterate thanks to staff. There's a lot of work happening behind the scenes. These guys are working long hours, and I appreciate that you have left an urgent meeting to be here, Ian, and I really appreciate that, and sorry for holding you up. But in doing so, I just bring the debate to a close and want you to all have confidence yourselves. Know that if there's any questions you have, please go to Ian and ask him. If there's any other questions you want to ask me, you can ask me and I'll point you to the right direction if that's what's needed. But get out there, communicate with your communities, communicate with Auckland, and have confidence that we will get through this and we will be stronger and better for it. So I'd like to move, seconded by Councillor Henderson. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Ladies and gentlemen, just before we break for lunch, Councillor Darby, did you have any other questions of the Q2 results that you didn't have answered that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, there was a motion that got voted on, and I probably would have liked to put the full stop after halfway through that, rather than it just appeared that we were packaging it. We were in the last part, and I had a question about liquidity. Is that motion still there? I know it's been voted on. But I'm just wondering why we voted on it. It was about the officer going, not all of us going. And it's I would have preferred, we've done it now, but I would have preferred a full stop after 2019 in the D, with the significant debt headroom and liquidity being eliminated or deleted. Just a question, what is our significant liquidity?
Well, do you want to answer that? I've got that. You answer it.
Credit lines are up to $1.3 billion.
And lack of, and no longer the 270 is in place. But Kevin.
No, sorry, look, I appreciate the mayor's response, but I really do like, what is our significant liquidity? We've said significant debt headroom, and we know we've got about 20%. It's probably not that significant, and it's definitely not significant in 2 years. It's eroded entirely.
Look, drawing some of the threads together that have come through before, and it is what the mayor qualified before. Short term, where we are today in our current state, we're in a very strong position leading into what we don't know is going to occur going forward. We don't know how long it's going to last, we don't know what the total financial implications are going to be, but what we do know, with all those unknowns in the future, what we do know today, as we stand, we have debt headroom available, and as the Mayor says, we have 1.3 million of committed line facilities available through the banks, 10 different banks. So we are in a very strong position today. We have an agile workforce, we have a structure built up around us as far as our IT equipment goes, which puts us in good stead. So what we do know is current state, what we don't know is future state. So that's the strong liquidity piece. It's those committed lines as well alongside the debt headroom.
So that 1.3, is that an accounting definition of liquidity though?
It's immediately available funding should it be needed. So from an accountant's perspective, you're right, it's probably not. That is actually realisable cash on your books. But from every other economic purpose, it is available funds. So yes, it does count as economic liquidity. But you are right, not in the accounting sense.
That's why I asked the question, because it's not my understanding of the definition of liquidity. I know it's there and it's a great facility to have, but that's why I wanted to just look at that a bit more.
Thank you. I just qualified by saying it was staff that put the resolution together. All right, we'll break for lunch for 20 minutes, for 30 minutes, and we will come back at 1:20. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. items 10, 11 and 12 and 13 and have them next month. In light of where we are with things and finances and everything else, we just need another few weeks to work on that. Just in case you are wondering, there are some statutory deadlines around that, and our meeting ensures that we still meet them. The statutory deadline is, of course, the end of April. So our meeting's on the 23rd of April, so we'll be able to handle that. So we move now then to item 14, boundary adjustment between Merrill Drive and Wellesley Street, and invite Rod to the front. Rod, could I please ask that you put hand sanitizer on your hands before you use the microphone? Thank you. Thank you. Yes, seconded by Councillor Henderson. Right, over to you. Thank you.
So, look, apologies to coming back to the committee on this one again, but this is a minor boundary adjustment. It relates to the Bledisloe car park, 4 to 10 Merrill Drive. There was an omission of a small parcel of land. It's literally half the size of this room, or quarter the size of this room, probably half. And we'd like to, of course, include that as a boundary adjustment to make the parcels that relate to the Bledisloe car park, which will be the Aotea Overstation development in the station, a more regular size and shape, and the boundary and the parcel of land associated with Bledisloe House, a regular shape and a straight line boundary. And that's also consistent with what the Waitemata local board were looking for, which is to create the laneway. So it'll make it more easy to create the laneway as part of that overstation development. No cost to council, it's a minor procedural matter.
Right, thank you. That last statement was the most important one. Any questions? Councillor Coombe.
Thank you. Just a very quick question. Could I, just through the chair, do we know, I mean, it's a bit of a curiosity as to how it's occurred. Do we know why it was actually there as a little separate parcel?
You're through the chair. It was an omission by those who were preparing the original report, which includes ourselves, so I put my hand up. But it relates to the complexity of the parcels of land, which were legacy parcels which never were corrected when the Bledisloe car park and Bledisloe House were kind of built. They actually relate to multiple buildings before that time, and so now is the appropriate time to address that more fully. But yes, it was an omission, so it's my apologies for that. Yeah.
You didn't, but that's, yeah. You didn't. Sorry, that was just clearing my throat. Any other questions for Rod? Councillor Walker.
I've just got a question around the laneway and the size of the laneway, and the context, I guess, is Melbourne and other cities where laneways aren't just lanes, they're used for activation on the part of restaurants and the like, so have tables and chairs, and you need a width in order to experience that, sometimes a reasonably wide width. Does this meet that requirement from an urban design perspective, and has our urban design office fed into this?
Yeah, look, through the chair.
We do have an urban design office.
Through the chair, look, that's a great question. I think we have a great opportunity in this laneway. It's actually a very wide space. It's about 10 metres wide from memory is what's protected, and that will be protected through the development agreements that we're forming with the overstation development parties. But yes, we are connecting and have connected with the likes of Regional Facilities Auckland Design Office, DPO, and also Auckland Transport, and particularly as it relates to the emerging Wellesley Street interchange for the bus network to the North Shore. So those things are actually in consideration as part of the design. It will be considered as part of the design, and it's part that we're reviewing at the moment, which we'd like to bring back to F&P either next time or the time after. We're just shaping that up with those parties.
The other part of my question, did we seek advice from our urban design office?
So mostly the advice that we're receiving is through design experts who have connections to the technical advisor group that Panuku use, and so there's that level of design input. There's also input through our council, Auckland ADO and DPO officers. So at this stage, that's the first stage. Then we'd like to come back into the planning committee and into F&P to review that.
So was that a yes?
Urban Design Office, just perhaps refresh me on who is the Urban Design Office in particular.
That's what I asked.
Well, it's not really for me to refresh, but I'm certain that the chair could do that.
Well, the chair actually can't. I'm not quite sure the status myself, and it's not a planning meeting, and the planning committee chair's not here either. So we'll come back to you on that, councillor.
Yeah, but can I just say we are planning to go through the planning committee before we come to F&P, so we can get their input into this, if that's an appropriate answer.
Well recovered, thank you, Rod. Any other questions for Rod? Right, we have a mover, councillor Cashmore, seconded by councillor Henderson. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Rod. Item 15 is the forward work program. Any questions on that? Obviously, there is a lot of extra work coming in. I'll move that then. Do I have a seconder, councillor Henderson? Yeah. Thank you. Questions, councillor Walker.
A question. I don't see anything in here on the marina strategy. I'm assuming that's part of a possible financial package.
Right, so that was, although we've had the resolution, and I know hasn't been acted on, you will remember, I am sure, the regional hearing on this issue, and we have an agreement on the budget between, I think, the users and certainly myself, that will have to move through annual plan, and we'll go from there. Any other questions? Great. I'll move that then, seconded by councillor Henderson. All those in favour say aye. Against, carry. Item 16 is a summary of our memos, briefings, including the forward work program. Any questions? I'll move that, seconded by the deputy. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Extraordinary business we've dealt with. Now we move into confidential. Thank you, councillor. I'll give a 2-minute clear the room, change the sanitiser.